The notice that is required for the hybrid meeting is as follows. This is to formally advise that is required by General Laws, Chapter 38, Sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021, is extended by special legislation dated July 16, 2022. The Yarmouth Board of Selectmen will hold a public meeting on Tuesday, December 20, 2022 at 5:45 p.m., beginning with executive session and opening to the public no sooner than 6 p.m. in the hearing room, Yarmouth Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access provided below, which is on our website. So do I have a motion to go into executive session to pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A, to discuss non-union negotiations, the police chief's draft agreement?
Motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Peter?
Second.
Dorcas, okay. Peter's motion, Dorcas second. We'll take a roll call vote on that. Peter?
Aye.
Dorcas?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
The chair votes aye as well. We're in executive session.
Hey, hey.
Because you don't have enough paperwork.
We don't, you know. As you know, government only survives with paper.
Hey, remember, I was director of student service special ed. I loved IEPs. You know, I mean, thousands of pages of that.
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord. Tonight. Appointment confirmation of Bill Benetti. What's bringing them all in? What's bringing all the crowd in?
So we got a crowd here tonight, huh?
If you had asked me that, last week, I would have said I'm really feeling great. But all of a sudden, the cough came back. Yeah, this is all for Bill Benetti.
I wonder if we should just kind of tease them along.
Thing.
In Tennessee back in executive session.
And to discuss, yeah.
About 10 days there.
All for Bill?
Huh? Yeah. Yeah.
Late last week, I started to feel like 95% still. I'm not running a fever or anything like that. So I called my doctor and he said, "You're feeling fine?"
That's kind of nice.
Pass this stuff down.
Yes, and I said, "Yeah." And everything was negative. Yeah, you're fine.
Who's that sitting next to him?
Well,
He did say it's a female.
You should probably start wearing a mask, though.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the public session of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen of December 20, 2022. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is public announcements. Do we have any announcements to make?
No announcements.
Peter?
No.
Okay. Next, we'll go to public comments. Christine?
Good evening. I'm Christine Greeley from West Yarmouth. I apologize, I won't be able to stay for the rest of the meeting. Obviously, you know how to attract a crowd. But I have given you at your desk a reprint of an article that came out of the Cape Cod Times, and I am exceedingly concerned about what is going forward with the airport. I need to tell you, the Yarmouth representative is never present at the airport commission meetings. I go to all of them. There are a lot of developments and things that are going on. Given that I've been here since 1981, during which time we were told at various times, well, people, you're building by the airport, you knew the airport's there, that kind of thing. Now they actually are encroaching upon the rest of the community, with their expansions and the things that they are doing. And it is getting very, very scary in a lot of ways. With the work that's been done on Mary Dunn Way, they now are out there looking for business with new hangars and things. And one of the things that they're doing is entertaining helicopter, aerial tours, and pilot training. And that's one of the people who is currently proposed for a lease, which is like a significant change. If you take a look at the location of their airport and the kinds of congestion and the other things that go on around it, it is a nightmare. And the idea that they are continuing to expand it is absolutely unreasonable. And one of the things that is going forward at this point is that there are the hearings on the meetings, particularly about the environmental plan and the other kinds of things that are going forward with the work that they need to do as they intend to increase the length of 1533. The tragedy of this coming year, which you need to be aware of, and it is not going to be pleasant living in Yarmouth, is that they are actually shutting down 624 completely for a rebuild. All air traffic starting in the early spring, probably by March or so, through the late fall, they're talking into November perhaps, will be on 1533, which means it will be flying over Yarmouth and out over Barnstable Village. And that is all traffic. This is while they are out and about, they're attending airport roundtables around the country, during which time they are attempting to solicit additional air carriers and other people coming here to do business out of this airport and seeking to have more air traffic. And so I think this is of major concern. I think that as many people as possible need to be participating either in the in-person or the Zoom that they're going to do on these. And I also, I know at one point we had a very active airport advisor consultant that was working with you. And I think that you need to be very, very concerned. When you take a look at what is it being built in Barnstable at the end of 1533, which is the power station grid for Vineyard Wind, with all of the cables and things there, along with the fluids that you know are a major significant problem because they had to go through great engineering on that. You can also see the increasing housing and things that they're building there. This is getting to be a nightmare. I mean, it's an absolute nightmare in terms of this community. This airport, if there's need for additional air traffic, larger runways, or more aircraft, larger aircraft, that needs to be elsewhere. And the whole issue has been talked about for quite a while of moving it to Otis. It does not belong on what was originally a small airstrip here in this town and now sits beside a major, major thoroughfare. You can see the traffic that's sitting out on that roadway now because of the construction that's going on INO Road and 132 and all. It's a nightmare even getting through the airport rotary. And so you need to be very, very clear in understanding this airport has some very significant, grandiose plans for what they need to do. We have not been expanding into them. They are encroaching and expanding onto our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? Okay. Move on then to the approval of the police chief's contract. Go ahead. Bob, we just met in executive session to go over any potential concerns with this contract, and there aren't any. So,
Well, once again, I'd like to welcome Chief Kevin Lennon. I believe he is at our meeting.
oh, there he is. I didn't see him there.
It's in the
Now we see
corner.
him and congratulate him on his recent appointment as Chief of
He
Police.
hasn't signed the contract yet. So sit down.
So since that appointment, obviously, we've been working very closely with the Board of Selectmen and with Chief Lennon to put into place an employment agreement that provides the terms and conditions of his employment. And we have a final draft, and my recommendation would be to approve that this evening.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve and sign the contract with Chief Kevin Lynn?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we approve the proposed contract presented to the board this evening.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, you have the copies you want us to sign? Let's do it right now, so we don't walk out forgetting about it. We have the chief, I was gonna say deputy chief, but we have the chief here. And get him to sign it.
There is a red folder.
Red folder's over there.
I didn't see it.
I'm gonna pass it down to my left first. Yeah, we definitely should do two.
Or your pen.
I've got a clean copy if you need a clean copy.
Lou.
There you go.
How are you?
I'm gonna do two.
That's great. You don't even need the rest of it to sign.
Oh,
Did you two?
oh.
That's great. It's approved. You're all set.
Thank you.
So I'll take the two signed ones down to the other end. Thank you. And then we'll be back.
We're good.
Marcus, you wanna
We're good.
sign both of these?
Well, actually, it's just marked as being the
Adjusting
chair and the vice chair. Yeah,
Is it?
yeah. It's just you two.
I thought there were signatures.
Oh, on the
Yeah, in
back.
the back. Mark didn't sign it?
Mark didn't know, I think.
Mark didn't know to turn the page?
No, I
Right.
don't think he did.
We'll have to go back again.
Okay, I'll take that one.
They're operational now. So
So
right
we're
now,
right now, we're talking. Thank you.
it's passively recording, it's not actively recording, so the
There you
cameras
go. Thank you.
rates, flash drive. It only records video at this point, it doesn't record audio until I press the button. So all the officers have been trained, and they're deployed. And then we're getting the cruisers online now. So hopefully by January, all the cruisers will be up.
That's great.
Okay, Kevin, we're ready for you.
There you go.
There.
NFL contract.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice, huh?
And there.
Kevin, you could be the quarterback for the Patriots. They could use somebody.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have another employment type issue. We have the appointment of a division head, Bill Bonetti, Director of Natural Resources, not national, or wish national. This is the division head appointment, and it is appointment by the town administrator. It can only be overturned with a 4/5 vote of the board. That's not going to happen. So I'm going to let Bill give you a little bit of, Bob rather, give you a little bit, and Bill wrote a letter of endorsement. They can give you a little background on this appointment, and I think you're asking the board to ratify the appointment.
Yes, rather than the way we've approached it, have a vote that you will see if we can overturn it, is that if the board ratifies it, then we don't have to wait the entire 15 days, but that's the charter provision, and, so we'll always go to the letter of the charter. But I do appreciate the opportunity to just say a few words on behalf of Bill Bonetti, and folks know that this past season, the entire summer season, Bill has been the acting director of natural resources, and I honestly, truly mean it when I say that Bill has exceeded my expectations during this transition and the retirement of Carl Von Hohn in almost every single respect. And it was always, very difficult when we had Mr. Von Hohn as the director here, a man of, tremendous stature in the profession and so many years' experience. And, Bill, during, that time had been the operations specialist that had been performing, so many of the duties in the department, assisting Mr. Von Hohn, that when Carl left, what we sought to do was to give Bill a chance and to see how he could work with this organization. And I'll tell you, between his Coast Guard experience, his Marine related law enforcement training, and all of the experience that he's had in the industry, Mr. Benetti has performed in an exemplary way. And some of the work that he's done on the emergency dredging contracts, on the dredging permits that really had, languished for so long, has been impressive. His work with Mr. Scott on all of the capital-related issues of the department, working on the staffing, working with the police department directly hand in hand on all of the post requirements and other things. Bill's done a great job, and I do also just want to acknowledge Bill Scott as well, who is the de facto department head for the Community Service Division, which includes the Department of Natural Resources, and has worked very closely with Bill. He had a very glowing recommendation. I don't know, Bill, if there's anything you wanted to add.
The board should have a recommendation dated December 12th, and, in the 6 months that I've worked with Bill, he has a clear passion for what he does in natural resources, and he really understands that he can make a difference in the community. His work on the Ways to the Water, picking that project up and working with residents, you can see that he really wants to get that done. He's committed to his team. And I think one of the more important things is he has a positive network inside town government and outside town government. So that dredging project was a function of the trust that people place in him to move forward with the permits, and the trust that he gives them in terms of doing the right thing by those permitting agencies. So, I look forward to working with Bill as, the supervisor of community services, and look forward to this appointment.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, do I have a motion to
Mr. Chairman,
ratify and confirm the appointment of Bill Benetti as the director of the department?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we ratify and endorse the appointment of Bill Benetti as the new Director of Natural Resources for the...
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have 2 seconds. That must be equal to a first. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Wow, well, I want to thank the board for all your support and everybody for coming tonight. I couldn't imagine everybody would have showed up the way that they did. That's kind of been the story of the last 6 months for me. The support that I've had has been unbelievable. I met with admin this morning, and I thanked Bob and Bill, but I just want to thank them publicly because, like I said, the support and the guidance when I've asked for it from them has really given me the confidence to feel that I could succeed in this role. And I'll try not to be too wordy, but, I had said to them that 25 years ago, Carl Von Hohn is in the audience, took a chance on me and saw something in me and gave me this opportunity. And through the years, he continued to support me and encouraged me one day fill his shoes. And like I said to Bob and Bill this morning, that really was never on my radar. I never pictured a DNR without Carl. But I'm glad that he did encourage me, and I'm glad that he's enjoying his retirement. But the fact that he encouraged me and I'm here, it's very rewarding. It's been very rewarding, and I look forward to continuing to serve the town of Yarmouth, working with all the departments. Chief Lennon, the police department, the entire police department, Chief Sawyer, and the entire fire department could not have been more supportive. All the town departments over the years, and in the last 6 months, I think I've interacted with every single town department and division. And again, the support and the teamwork, I really feel like the town of Yarmouth is, in my very humble opinion, the town of Yarmouth's in a very good place right now. And also I can't not mention that really I'm just a part of a really great team that we have at Natural Resources. People that are highly talented and highly dedicated and really care about doing their job well. Any success that I've had or will have is only because of them. Lastly, one of my big things that I've really recognized, and I saw this with Carl, but I don't think we can meet our goals and complete our mission without strong community engagement. And over the years, I really valued the relationships that I've made within the community, and I look forward to new ones that will be formed in this new capacity. I really don't think, like I said, we can accomplish our goals without strong community engagement and partnering with the community stakeholders. So that being said, again, thank you, and I really look forward to continuing to serve the town of Yarmouth.
Thank you. Okay. I guess we don't have to send him to the public speaking department, huh?
Any good?
All set, all right.
It's good.
Thank you, Bill, appreciate it. Next is an update on the fire chief's position. We are currently interviewing candidates with the assistance of a consultant, and
Yeah, a
Why don't
couple
you
of
take
words
it
about
from
the
there?
process. Folks are very interested in it, and we've had a lot of great participation. And I do want to let folks know that the town has been working with Municipal Resources Incorporated, which is one of the leading recruitment firms and assessment firms for public safety executives in Massachusetts. And using that firm, we have recently completed our assessment center process that 4 candidates went through in the previous weeks. And as a result of that process, we have 3 candidates to forward to the Board of Selectmen for interview. Our own acting Chief John Sawyer, our own Captain Scott Smith, and Jeffrey Verone of West Warwick, Rhode Island. And Municipal Resources, Inc. has agreed to continue to work with the town and the board to help us structure a detailed interview process and facilitate that format, questions, and assist with the scoring. And we need to finalize our time frame for dates to conduct the interviews. And we have 3 dates. They're not cast in stone, but we thought we could work with the board to see your preference. I know they're January 5, 12, and 13. 5 might be rushing things a little bit right after the holidays.
next selectmen's meeting in January.
The 10th.
Yeah,
January 10th.
there's a meeting on the 10th, which we were trying to go for an in-between meetings schedule, so
So,
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just put the 5th on the table. I think the sooner the better.
the only problem I have with the 5th is it's kind of soon, and we should be preparing our questions. I was really hoping to do a later date than that. Just after the holidays is kind of quick. I don't know how the others feel, but I'd rather go out to the 12th or 13th.
I'm fine going out. 5th is my anniversary.
It's your anniversary?
In trouble.
You want to get out of it? Let's do the 5th. No.
I would propose
No,
the
we're not going
12th.
to do the 5th. We gotta respect that. We gotta.
Either one of those is fine.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest the 12th.
So that's a Thursday.
Anybody have a preference in terms of either the 12th or the 13th?
The 12th would be my preference.
So the 12th is going to be what, a Thursday?
Thursday, yeah.
Yeah. 13th is a Friday. That'd be kind of tough. Let's do the 12th. Everybody all right with the 12th? Mark?
Both of those days are problems for me, but I'll do my best to work around them.
You have a problem with the 12th?
Yeah, but like I said, everybody's, the board seems to prefer the 12th or the 13th. I'll just do my best to try to make one of those
All right,
dates work.
let's do the 12th then. Okay.
All right, we'll start preparing for that. In terms of our timeframe, we thought maybe we would start sometime, late in the afternoon and to get wrapped up by early evening-ish.
We'll kind of do it parallel to what we did with the candidates for police chief.
That's what I was
Similar
thinking,
schedule.
same time. And what I'll do is I'll get a hold of the Municipal Resources, Inc. We'll get the dates working, get the notices out, and then we'll have some materials. I think we'll have ample time to review questions, and we'll probably try to set up a session. I know we're meeting on January 10, where we can, do some preparatory work, so the board will have everything that you need to hit the ground running on the 12th.
Well, might we get some stuff emailed to us prior to our next meeting?
Yes, the idea would be we'll get all of the information prior to the meeting of the 10th, and then we'll have a chance to meet as a whole group on the 10th and finalize things. And then if we need a little time on the 12th, we could meet a little early just to make sure everything's all set.
All right. Next item, drought update, report from the Water Division.
Why don't you just give them a second to...
Hmm?
draw?
Yeah.
Geez, Jeff, you get to the mic and everybody leaves. Wow.
Scared them away, Jeff.
Yeah.
Drought, they see the drought coming. They're running for water.
Yeah.
A really interesting part of the meeting, I thought, too, so.
Just give them a minute.
That was good support. Nice to see.
Yeah. Okay, we're ready to proceed with a report from Jeff Colby, Director of Public Works, on the state of the drought on Cape Cod and the islands. Jeff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. As I think the board and community generally is aware, we went through a pretty significant drought this past summer. Had to take some conservation measures that allowed us to make it through that very dry period. In fact, that July and August was probably one of the drier periods in decades that we've had, frankly. But since that time, and we were at that level 3 on your chart that you've seen, and also in your packet there's a Massachusetts drought status map that also lists the levels as well. Level 3, which we were this summer, is the critical drought. The only next stage is emergency. So it was a pretty dire situation. We have regained some of that levels of water in the aquifer. In fact, we made steady progress after that July and August period, that in November, they actually downgraded us to a level 1, just a mild drought. So we're making some very good progress. But the state drought task force does meet monthly this time of year. They meet more frequently during the growing season, but this time of year it's monthly. And they determined that because of the minimal amount of precipitation in November, they brought us back up, at least the Cape and Islands, to the level 2 of significant drought. Now, we are entering the period in December, in January and February, where we typically recharge the aquifer. So we do expect that these next couple of months that between some amount of precipitation, either rain or snow, I hope mostly rain, but in that particular case, to recharge the aquifer. In fact, I brought some information that I can pass around to the board that just shows a couple of local monitoring wells, and they are starting to rebound. You can kind of see that, but it is a very slow, gradual process in which to build that level within the aquifer. I'll just hand this over to you.
Sure.
Jeff, thank you.
So what was the, Jeff, just for clarity, what was the highest level we reached? Was it 3 or 4 this summer?
It was 3. We were never at
You
that
were never hit
emergency
4?
level. We have triggers within the policy that the board has established for not just what the drought task force assigns us, and they certainly could assign a level 4 emergency. They didn't do that for any of the communities in Massachusetts this year, but it is possible just based upon drought status. But we also have triggers within our policy if we have a number of wells down or our production is not able to keep up with demand, that could potentially be a trigger as well. And we have not reached that status either. So we were fortunate that we made it through a very dry period with 4 of our drinking water wells offline. We are on track. This is a little bit of an update for the board. We are on track to bring 2 of those wells online this summer with the PFAS remediation. That contract has been awarded, and the tentative schedule that the contractor has given us has us back online with wells 4 and 5 for this summer. We've also recently got approved by DEP for bringing well number 9 back online as well. So we'll have significant capacity back online this next summer if everything continues to go well, beyond what we had this past summer. So we're making great strides not only in the production, but also in the improvement of the groundwater. So with those 2 elements, we should be in a much better place for next summer.
Okay. Just for the sake of the public, this is a great map showing the different, in color codes, different sections of the state and what levels they are with respect to drought conditions. Is there any way we can get this up on our website, this map?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's status as of December 12th of this year, so it's pretty recent information. And again, for the public's sake, the highest level is a level 4, which is called an emergency drought. And as Jeff just said, we never reached level 4 this summer, but we did reach the next level, which was level 3, which is categorized as a critical drought. And we progressed from that point to a level 2, which is described as a significant drought. So we're still at the significant drought level. The next level to progress to would be a level 1, which is a mild drought, and then you go to normal after that.
Correct.
So we are 2 levels, I guess, from normal, but moving in the right direction. What's interesting on this map is, except for Cape Cod, the South Shore area is all in white here, which is all normal.
Yeah, certainly the state is trending in a much better direction, and I expect that Cape Cod will continue to gain reduced levels as we go through the wintertime.
Yeah. So it's a great map. I mean, very, very clear, very informative, and it's great to compare. You could see quickly with the colors, like in the western part of the state, they're at level 1. So nobody is at level, nobody in the state seems to be at level 3 or 4, which is good. So does anybody in the board have any questions or comments? We'll start with Mark.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Dan?
No, thank you.
Dorcas?
No, thank you.
Peter?
The map that you gave us out, the grid that you gave us out, I think that should also be on the web because it shows the groundwater dips over the last 3 years, which were actually quite significant, including this summer. And in addition, I've had a few folks ask me, are we still in a drought or not in a drought? And, I think somewhere we need to advertise that we're still in a drought and you still need to watch your water use.
Absolutely. We do post it on the water conservation tab on the town website, what our status is. So it's still there, but I do think people aren't thinking as much about it because we're not within the growing season.
Jeff, on this map, it says that hard surface washing should be limited, while communities should create goals in order to restrict water use. What do they mean by hard surface washing? Like cars and things like that?
It would be more houses, driveways, people do that, and it's not a problem when water's plentiful. But as soon as we start to hit those various levels of concern within the amount of water we have available, activities should be restricted, and that's what the state guidance is that should happen in the various levels that we're at. And in a normal level, it wouldn't be a problem, but as you get into, level 1, level 2, level 3, you should take increasing number of measures to try to preserve the water.
Okay.
Just one question. Jeff, where we're still at level 2, would it be your advice that we get a little bit stronger in terms of our messaging? Should we be putting signs out in the community to help inform and educate our people, or are the trends such that you're comfortable just progressing forward and hoping that the aquifer recharges in the next few months?
Yeah, I think it would be my recommendation to take a wait-and-see attitude as to how the next couple of months unfold. Some communities have, Harwich as an example, has decided to remove all restrictions because we're in the non-growing season. That's probably, a one extreme, if you will. I think having some amount of water conservation in mind all the time based upon drought levels is probably advisable. But I think that really getting the message out and ramping up our education really should happen as we enter the spring. And it would be my hope at that time that we'd be much closer to the normal level. If not, then we'll have to certainly get the word out as to what status we are and what the current restrictions are at that point.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Jeff.
Great, thank you.
Next item is vehicle policy update. My understanding from talking to Bob today is...
Chairman,
Actually,
I actually have a wastewater finance discussion on my agenda.
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry. Finance discussion on wastewater, okay. My mistake, Mark, thank you. Okay, wastewater finance discussion, we've gotten a report. My understanding is that this report was prepared by Bob Rittenauer, Ed Centeo, our finance director, and Bill Scott, our assistant town administrator, working together on this. It's very good piece of work, very detailed. And I read it today with great interest. I talked briefly with Bob about it, and my understanding is that each of them will give part of the presentation. So we'll start with you, Bob.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to make some introductory comments, and then we're going to turn it over to Bill, who's got some great slides that I think the board as well as the public will certainly appreciate. But just to set the stage for everyone and the folks at home as well for where we are, as we all know, the town has been working very hard now for several years in developing plans for our wastewater system to help protect water quality in our coastal embayments, which is threatened by nitrogen loading that has been identified. And I want to call out Jeff Colby, who is here with us, our project manager for the wastewater project. I think he's done an exemplary job together with our Water Resources Advisory Committee, the RAC, to work with the town's consultants, who are also here with us as well, to develop a high-quality design plan to begin to address the wastewater, along with a phasing plan to move forward with the cleanup in a stepwise and hopefully affordable way. Now, the big issues that we had faced is during this design process, the town lost some very critical time by responsibly pressing for a regional solution to the wastewater problems that we face in our region. Ultimately, I think it became extremely evident that we saw the need to initiate our own solution here in Yarmouth first, which will in turn open the door for better future regional collaboration. And I think we feel that way strongly, that this project will be headed towards regional collaboration as we move through the various phases. But in order to set the stage for that, that we need in Yarmouth to establish the leadership and begin to address our own issues and set that tone. Now, during this period that we made these decisions and did this study, the cost inflation has had a significant impact on this project. And it has caused us internally a tremendous amount of frustration as we struggled to keep pace with the cost of this project as we put the design together and as we decided on the best way to move forward. So, taking back, it was October of this year, 2022, when we received the most recent cost escalation numbers for the project, and they were significant, adding tens of millions of dollars to the overall cost of the project based on where we had been looking at it over the last several years. And in response to that, and I think when we put together our team, my comment was that these numbers were keeping me up at night, and that is a very true statement. What we did to deal with that as an offshoot of our larger project team, we formed a financial review team consisting, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, of our finance director, Ed Centio, Assistant Town Administrator Bill Scott, and also assisting and participating in that process was our assessing director, Andy Machado, our assistant assessing director, Tara Monroe, who I want to thank tremendously for their work, whether it's in terms of helping with the district improvement financing, with analyzing betterment issues. We have a great team, and me together. We set up to review the project in detail to make a determination if the financial feasibility for this overall project still remained. So we proceeded since that time to go back over every single aspect of the financial plan for the project. And what you're going to hear this evening is we've made the determination that not only is this project financially feasible to move forward, but there's many factors that are coming together now that pointing to this time in the present as the perfect opportunity to move forward with phase one of this project. And included here, you'll hear a number of reasons, but just this past week, we've received word from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection that the town of Yarmouth is the #1 priority in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on the state's SRF intended use plan. And we were wondering if we were going to make the plan as a recommended project of DEP, and we are the #1 priority in the Commonwealth, according to DEP. And I think a lot of that goes to the intensive preparations that have brought us to this point where we're at right now. I think in analyzing a lot of the complex components around this project, we have the feeling that to do anything else but to move forward with this project at this time would place the town at substantial risk. And those risks are both financially, in terms of the cost will continue to rise tremendously and rapidly, and also create very much uncertainty in a rapidly changing regulatory environment. We've all seen all of the new proposals. If towns aren't capable of moving forward, what is going to happen to the towns? And I think that puts individual households at risk as well as the town. But even more importantly, not moving forward would place the town at a risk environmentally with more damage to the town's estuaries that could even go to impacting water supplies. That we've seen the septic systems as a growing suspect for some of the PFAS contamination that we have and other forms of contamination that may eventually impact those wells in a negative way. So it is just more fuel that we have the science to know that the town needs to have a strategy for addressing this environmental harm. So given that, the other key point I think you're going to hear this evening is the power of this particular project and the financing plan that was put together and is now being honed down. That power is found in approximately 10 independent and structural financing sources that all go together to fund this. And by not over-relying on one single financing source, we're able to rise all of the financing sources to work together to be able to fund this program. And as an example, and fund this program without placing it immediately on the town's tax rate, which was the board had given us that as a charge to try to do. And as an example of how that power works, and you're going to see it this evening through the presentation, if we had projected, well, we're not going to use the property tax, so 100%, 75%, even 50% of this project is going to be funded through betterments. And then you get the rapid cost escalation. What that causes is that section of betterments from local homeowners to increase very rapidly and put the project at risk. And that's what we feared the most. Through this project, you're going to see that the betterment component, for example, represents only 14 or so % of the overall financing. So when you have cost escalation, yes, it does require more of a financial contribution from betterments, but as 14% of the overall project, no one funding source is overtaxed. And residents should find it affordable, much more affordable than some of the DEP regulations. So those are some of the highlights in the background that I think is very important to just set the stage to move forward. And with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Bill Scott to review the report that you have. And then we're also definitely looking forward to hearing from Ed on the model that he's created to help us put this in perspective.
Well, thank you, Bob. Bill?
Thanks. You should have a report in front of you titled Phase 1 Wastewater Funding Program Recommendations, December 2022. The presentation we have actually follows the report exactly. The language is excerpt from that, so you'll see highlights in there to sort of get to the point of the language. But the tables and everything else are represented here, so we can share with the public what you're seeing in the report. So moving on, and if Ed or you, Bob, want to interject, feel free as we go through this. So the most important aspect of this is in August 2021, the board determined that they wanted to proceed as an individual community. And that really changed the paradigm as we proceeded, because it gave the staff and the engineering team the ability to focus on Yarmouth. And so this is really an important aspect to this. And given it is less than a year in front of the June 1 letter, it gave us a running start in terms of some of the DEP issues. So that's from the DEP letter, and it's a indication of what their concerns are environmentally. And it's pretty straightforward that in 1950 the population was 3,297, and the population in 2010, 23,793. And the yellow on the map represents development. And that's predominantly housing development to some degree, and it is also development, obviously, with septic systems. So where this began over that period of time. I think the population around 1980 or so was around 18,000. So you can see that that growth has gotten to a point where there isn't really any turning back with septic systems and things like that. We need to move forward with a sewer plant. So the increased population has, caused the environmental degradation, and mitigation is necessary. So the recent projects is really a testament to how Public Works, the engineering team, and others have coalesced around that mission that the board pointed out in August. And even before that, when we're still looking at regional, the town went into the annual town meeting and appropriated $5 million plus for the collection system. So that gave us a running start on the collection system, which was fortunate. And then the Municipal Wastewater Investment Fund, which I believe is referred to as a WIF, was then approved. And then the Wastewater Enterprise Fund was approved in 2021. And then the appropriation of $4.5 million for the treatment plant design. So that appropriation is the indication that we are moving ahead as a community, as it's actually indicated in the newspaper. Continuing on with that, we continued on in 2022 with the stabilization fund, the district improvement financing, which I can discuss a little more detail later, is at the same town meeting. Notice of project change, it's filed in March, state revolving loan fund, August of 2022, and to Bob's point earlier, at the bottom there, it is, and it's in your report, I think, in one of the, there's a table, and that table is an indication of, it's on page 15. Yarmouth is right at the top, and so they scored the top out of all the SRF funding, which I think is about 59 communities. So, I mean, that's a very positive sign in terms of progress. So the project purpose, it is actually more than what's highlighted, but it is to reduce nitrogen to loading to the receiving coastal waters through the discontinued use of on-site septic systems in the southern portion of Yarmouth and the treatment of the associated wastewater with enhanced nitrogen removal at the central plant. And the key to that is that it is reducing the reliance on septic systems. Earlier, a few decades ago, I believe that there was an intent with the septic plant to see if we could do this with, using a septic plant and better septic systems, but it's clear we can't based on what DEP's concerns are, and we're moving forward. So this is from the CWMP report. So, as the town administrator indicated, we have had escalation, and we've had escalation throughout this. The report indicates that, there were discussions about how we could have got this for 90%. In 1980, it was around $9 million. So that's really all in the past, and the future is really about putting this in the ground to the extent that we stop the escalation because we're starting the construction. So. CDM Smith provided us with some indications of what that escalation was. You can see the cost in terms of 162 million, and then the cost at 207 million. So it's really they have provided information from the ENR document. And it shows about a 7% increase where they were looking at 3%. And they are looking at their cost estimates based on when the construction starts and not as of today. So their projections are really looking out when they believe the construction is going to begin. So the table, that's changes everything in terms of each of the phases. The board has heard, this is broken up into several contracts along, the route. And the town-centric approach has allowed us to really look at this in terms of, the phases and the individual contracts, because we're not trying to, include places where we don't have all the decision-making power. But the distinct advantage to this is, as we're working with property owners in the diff, we're able to tell them, reasonably, we'll probably be around here with this construction phase or that construction phase, and that's very important for them to project their development. You know, as I'll tell you more detail later, the issue is people want to see the progress, want to understand the progress before they make commitment for a development, solid commitment. But everything is there. This is the engineering side of the project, the start date and the completion date, and progress has been continuing. And then the bottom half of that same chart, which is in your report, after unraveling, you know, the regional project, we have the costs associated with the town project. Same things, and it's very encouraging to see some of those dates there in you know, 2026, 2025 in terms of completions. And one of the things is as we move forward, probably break out the treatment plant, obviously, in a separate contract from collection. So we'll look at financing in terms of those things. We've been talking about the DIF as a means to fund the treatment plant, and, you know, the collection system would be some of the other funding. So what I'm going to do is go through some of these funding sources that Bob had mentioned, all those funding sources. And I'm going to do this relatively quickly, and the highlights are up there. A lot of this text is either from an MGLA or a DOR handbook or something like that. So it's information that comes directly from the source. So betterment program is where a area receives a special benefit or advantage other than the general advantage to the community from the construction or public improvement. The assessment of their cost must be regional, reasonable, and proportional. And the key with this is you can't charge everything, you know, to one person for a betterment. You really need to look at the calculation and how they're being served by that improvement. So when town administrator indicated it's 15%, we believe that's very reasonable in terms of the, you know, the betterments paying for 15% of the cost. So the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust to help Cape Cod Island towns pay for wastewater. It's within the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. That is a major component of this project, as you'll see in the chart. These are some other funding sources that are more local. Solar, additional lease revenues to the town, disposal of septic waste fee, and then free cash that may be available for the project. District improvement financing, the board has seen this before at the town meeting. Simply put, the DIF captures the benefits of economic growth from the new investments and dedicates the revenue to the project. So one of the keys to the DIF is that you really, developers want to see the asset moving forward. We do have about probably 8 developments that are looking to move forward. We have developments that are already in the pipeline in terms of the Irish Village and things that we've captured because we chose that date in 2021. So we also have, I think it's the one of the affordable housing projects we captured. Originally, it was $660,000, and that went up to $5 million in terms of property value. I think it was Yarmouth Gardens. So we do have some, by virtue of when we went into town meeting and set the base, we do have some growth that occurred since we set that base. So that's a good thing because it's already constructed or under construction. And the key to a DIF, new growth, and actually the assessor was helpful in this, it's when you can swing a hammer or something that wasn't there, you know, that you can't count new growth, you know, when I'm talking to him about it, as replacing windows or renovation. It has to be something new, and it can't be based on market values. So it's a tough calculation, but we do have some projects that we think we're going to move forward on. O&M user capital fees, it's basically, you know, the user fees, about 25% of the O&M can be applied to the debt and maintenance and other factors. SRF forgiveness, and this one I think is at 6.6%. Bob, I don't know if you had additional information on this one.
Yes, in fact, Jeff and I just met this afternoon, and there's very good information in terms of the SRF, their current formula, and we have it baked into our model, is that, there's that minimum 6.5% to 7% loan forgiveness for where our community sits on the economic justice model. And in addition to that, through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, that there is, I believe it's $34 million that is slated to be devoted to loan capital forgiveness for the SRF program. And if we're the number one priority community and there's only 4, and our project is, 5 times larger than the next one, we feel that strongly that we haven't counted on these funds, but one of the things that you'll see about this model, that it is very much designed that we're carrying a blank on some of the additional grant funding that we hoped would be available from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the federal government as well. So our model is set to readily take in some of this additional capital forgiveness money that we won't know the exact amounts till we get closer to the appropriation. But one of the reasons for our strong level of confidence is that we have a model that works and is still feasible without those funds, but with those funds in, it becomes much more affordable for all of the other things such as having the free cash and all of the short-term rental. I mean, we've really devoted a lot to making this model work. So by having a pressure valve with some of those additional capital forgiveness on the SRF, that could prove to be very valuable for this program.
So moving on to the next one, short-term rental tax. It includes the new revenue generated from short-term rentals, which the town has identified as a critical source for wastewater. And as you see below the title, where applicable, the town meeting date and the action is indicated. Wastewater Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act. This is EPA funding, and what it is sort of financing that allows a deferrable. So basically you can get the financing and defer it, I believe, for 5 years after the project is completed. As a result, this is a good tool for the front end of the project. So it's one of those things where you'll see later that's going to help us with that period of time in the first 5 years where the revenue isn't coming in because the construction is underway and the plant isn't, flowing right away. The WIF, basically the town of Yarmouth accepted the Massachusetts General Laws 40, Section 39, and allows a 0.78% surcharge on the taxes. I believe this was offset by a reduction in the exemption and surcharge for CPA. And ARPA. So this is really some of your front-end gap financing. This is ARPA funding. And I believe ARPA has to be committed by 2024 and then spent by 2026. And basically, this is a good placement for this funding in terms of being able to spend it on the front end of the project. So what Bob indicated, and Bob, feel free to chime in, is that this is the breakdown of all the funding sources. So you can see there's a very good distribution of the funding sources. In the betterment comprising 15%, the CCIWPF 22%. So what it shows you is by attacking this in a comprehensive manner, we're able to fill in all those gaps and move forward. But this also doesn't include some of the other funding sources which, are in the spreadsheets in blank, and we're waiting on like that additional money from the SRF forgiveness program and possibly additional ARPA money, we might be seeking. So this is just quickly, you see all those funding sources to the left, and the diff was the gap between the betterments and the user rates. And so we're still working with developers on the diff. My experience in doing 2 diffs is you start the project out and then you start seeing a lot of people committing to growth. So what we have now is very conservative in terms of what our estimates are, which is about $928,000 a year after about the 6th or 7th year. We have a slow growth based on some existing projects and projects people want to move forward with even without sewer. But then it pretty much levels off in the diff with a few key projects. But, we would anticipate that, as the sewer moves forward, more investment commitments would occur. So this is that first 5 years that I mentioned earlier. So the progression of funding over time. So if you take the funding schedules that Ed, Finance Director, has developed, and you apply sort of that last total column, you start to see this pattern where, in the beginning, you don't have as much funding, and then it ramps up. So that whole idea of, funding the first 5, which is in your report, is a crucial part of this because, you don't have an open plant and construction is still happening in a collection system. So what we want to do is be able to use the DIF and other things to fill in some of those years, but also ARPA and then the EPA funding for the gap financing. So this is sort of what's already in the report. The first 5 years, the treatment plant, in those first few years isn't up and running. There isn't a lot of flow because the collection system is making connections to properties. So your revenue isn't as high as it would be when you're fully engaged with the phase 1. So the pre-funding, as you can see, WIFA, septic towage fee, ARPA County, ARPA Town, ARPA County, WIF, short-term rental, they're all funds that either accrue or are available that allow us to, just going back, fill in that yellow box.
One thing we might just point out, the relationship among those funding opportunities as well. And as you can see, it's a similar process in that first 5 years. It's a separate financial funding process, but we hope not to be, taking it all from one source. For example, you could borrow all of the money that you need for the first 5 years and then defer the payments on those. But what that does, it just pushes it out through the life of the loans and, creates additional cost. And that type of borrowing that covers the first 5 years is not 0% through the WIFIA. So what we're seeking to do is to, again, and we've had this program for a while, to be as aggressive as we can to do the pre-funding, that if we can build up $10, $12 million that can be apportioned, that will lower the financing costs for those first 5 years. If there's any additional funds, we know that we did receive from the county that first $1 million. We had anticipated that we would receive over $3 million. Maybe there'll be an additional tranche of funds. That all of that is very valuable. Any money that the town can set aside, for instance, we've been putting that free cash at about $2 million a year, popping into there. We're already collecting the money in the WIF, but as much money as we can pre-fund this program with, that's what goes to help pay for those initial years, and that we're going to have to fill in any residual amounts with borrowing. And so what we're seeking to do is to try to get as much cash up front as we can among as many sources. So, grants and things like that are very helpful.
So one of the ironies of the project is as the project, if the project doesn't progress, you have continued inflation on the construction and the project costs, but you also have continued environmental degradation. So neither one of these stops. I mean, if you look at environmental degradation of inflation of the impacts, there's 2 inflation curves that are happening. One on the project that the costs are going to continue to go up, and the other one on the environment. And based on DEP's action, it looks more like that we can't let the environmental one go, and we really don't want to delay this because the other one causes us additional costs. So, that is one of the ironies of the project, that both of these inflation factors, degradation and costs, are co-occurring at the same time. So moving forward in the project, we can stop both. One of the things is, you talk about escalation. If the project doesn't move forward, then everybody is looking at the nitrate systems as may be applicable to the home. So I have a little offset box there that people will feel the escalation in the inflation at their front door because the availability of nitrate contractors and chasing them down, and each person is solely responsible to engineer, construct, and maintain their project in perpetuity if the wastewater project doesn't move forward. So the question is do we want the inflation in one singular manageable source, which is the town's wastewater project, or does it get spread out over everybody's home? Because, people tell me that it's tough to get a contractor down here. Imagine when all these homes have to hook up a nitrate system and suddenly they're, trying to compete for the same contractors. It's not going to get cheaper for them. So whatever the estimates are for those systems, you could probably escalate them considerably based on those market forces for competition. And one of the keys to this in terms of environmental damage in the nitrate systems is it doesn't solve PFAS. And PFAS, we've had two, projects that are moving forward. One of them $5 million for the treatment systems. If we don't solve PFAS on the wastewater level, if we believe that the nitrate system, which they won't solve PFAS, then we're basically trusting the water supply in each individual homeowner and system that will be installed over a longer period of time, maybe than we would install the wastewater program, at least in phase one. So the positive beginning, some people are, concerned, when will you get to my phase? And I think the important thing is, when will we start in terms of phase one? And the town is extremely fortunate in the way the engineers, Public Works, and others have laid this out in the sense that you're starting in a commercial area. You're going to have higher flows per linear foot of pipe. You're going to have proximity to the treatment plant. So those two things, and you're going to have higher diff numbers. I mean, imagine if we started in a residential neighborhood, there wouldn't be the diff. There's no real growth there that would count as new growth. And you might not have, the high numbers, would probably not have the high numbers associated with flow. So we want high numbers in flow, and we want high numbers in growth. And by having both of those things, we can collapse that first 5 years. And so starting in phase one, where the engineers and staff have designated it, is the best place to start. But the key to it is that last sentence. Without phase one, there's no treatment plant, and there's no trunk lines, and there's no project. So it's understandable people are concerned about the next phase and the next phase, but this needs to get approved to get to those other ones. So it's almost an absence of presence or mutually exclusive situation where it's not about the phasing of the program, it's about getting the treatment plant done so the rest of the phases can be done. And first to market set the stage. There's Yarmouth out in front. And I think the most important thing here is, as we are moving forward because of that directive by the board in August of 2021, as DEP is looking at the regulations, we have a distinct advantage maybe to be the pilot program, to work with DEP to say, let's see if our objectives can be met on our program, because we're the first ones to, move forward. I mean, we wouldn't want to be the second in that race and some other town has set the standards for how these programs move forward. We want to be the one that's on the cutting edge and the pilot. So as we talk to the state agencies, we're talking from the perspective of what our needs are. And so I think it's important that first to market set the stage in anything anybody does. These are really important factors because you're the one who's setting the groundwork, and by virtue of that, the town is getting the results that they want. So this one is the table. I don't know if Bob and Ed, you want to go over this one. This is the table on the last page that describes.
I just want to give a couple of words on what this is designed to show. And I think through Ed's model, you'll get a better sense for how it works among the years. But what we've taken here is a slice of a typical year of the financing program, when the diff starts to kick in at, near its phase one build-out. So this is several years into the program. And what it shows is a comparison with the annual debt service capital costs and how all of those individual funding sources are brought to bear and what their relative contributions are toward, in this particular year that we've selected to show the performance of this model, that it not only meets the debt service, but generates a small surplus for that given year. Now, each year is a slightly different performance level based on where the individual funding sources fall, but what it's geared toward doing is over a 30-year period by working with some annual surpluses in some years, deficits in the other years, pre-funding, evens out so that the model works. But I think this shows you a good snapshot of the relative amounts of all of the funds when that full funding kicks in. So that's
I don't know if we wanted to go back through anything before, what I'm going to do is hand it over to Ed.
Go on to the
All right,
profile.
so we'll be switching to a spreadsheet in a minute and from the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good evening.
Right. So,
So the public knows the speaker now is Ed Centeo, our finance director.
I just want to point out, this is what I think many of you have seen over the last 10 years since we shifted to try to fund this from the tax rate to utilizing non-real estate property taxes to fund the project. This is a large spreadsheet because we're trying to be very transparent about the individual revenue sources. In the past, you may have seen some of the revenue sources combined into single columns. This allows you to see, again, each of the sources and what we have either for actual dollars that are coming in or have come in, or estimates of what we project might be coming in going forward. And we're trying to be very conservative about these revenue sources and not try to identify revenue sources that we're not comfortable with putting on this particular document. I also want to shout out to Bob Harding from our Finance Committee. He's the one that brought forth the WIFIA idea about delaying the debt service until revenues start flowing into the project. And then, several years back, he introduced the DIF concept initially, was voted at town meeting, but Bill's done a tremendous amount of work to refine that, expand it, and look to generate more revenue. So I want to, again, recognize Bob Harding for that work. So as you'll see from the document, I'm not going to go through every one of these columns. If you want to ask some questions about a specific column, the first column, the free cash, overlay reserves, capital stabilization, and other funds, is meant to be an area where we can actually inject dollars into this project in order to balance off and make sure that the last column, which is the most important column, doesn't ever go into the negative. So if we see that the last column is going to go into negative, then we want to do some things about it. So this is a model that will be adaptive as things change. The folks working this model and this project will also change how it is financed to some degree. Again, if the second to last column, which says, hey, you can go into negative occasionally on an annual basis, but again, the most important column, and let me go over. right.
Very touching mouse.
So this is the most important column. It is fine that we're going into negative, say, in this year, because we're starting to pay some large debt service, but we've already pre-funded from other sources like short-term rental, the WIF, and we've also gotten dollars from the ARPA funds that we're using. So when you add up the ARPA funds plus the $5 million, we've got around $9 million of pre-funding through the federal government and from the county as it relates to ARPA funds. So the key is never to go negative on the right-hand column. And as you'll note, depending on this model, we say, well, we're going to have to inject $750,000 of free cash in this particular row. Right now, we've been very conservative with our budgeting and our finances, and we have $13 million in free cash. So that's not, as it would have been in previous years, something that's an incredible hit on the town in terms of free cash. We've managed our finances so that that would not be a major issue. And then we have some of the work that Bill's been working on, the DIF, and prior to that, we took some money from New Growth to do the funding. We've been funding right along from the short-term rentals, betterments, which is a very small amount of money. We used to have a septage loan program in Yarmouth. We got permission from the state to actually use the surplus we had in there for wastewater, and any amounts of money we're getting paid back from those loans. For the wastewater project, we got that okay about 2 or 3 years ago. It's a small amount of money, about $7,000 a year, but we've already paid off all the debt, so they've given us permission to utilize that for wastewater. And then we're looking at host fees from the septic facilities and a variety of other sources that are online or that will come online fairly soon. So anytime, again, things change, if we get more visibility into the O&M costs, we can modify the O&M cost, see what that does over the course of the debt service for Phase 1, and make the appropriate modifications as this goes along. Jeff has always talked about the wastewater construction plan is an adaptive plan as we understand more about the nitrogen impacts of actually cleaning up certain areas. Then we can adapt and modify how the new construction might be done in order to accommodate what we've learned as we go along with the construction. The same thing will happen with the financing model. And you have some blank columns here. A lot of this is lobbying the state and the county and the federal government to get additional funds, as Bob has indicated, so that we can continue to supplement this, look to start funding the future phases of this project by bringing on other sources of money and or reducing perhaps some of the debt service that we would take on. Are there any questions you have about this model? And behind this model, when we're doing the betterments and the sewer rates, we also have some sophisticated models that combine our property information from our assessing database to our water information from our water systems to actually do that modeling as well, based on Title V types of criteria.
Anybody have any questions for Ed at this point?
But before Ed's done, I just want to say throughout this process, I couldn't tell you how impressed I am to see the in-house knowledge in his manipulation of the very large relational databases that he sort of casually refers to, that process that takes all of the property and mixes it with the database for the water usage, mixes it, with the databases for, all of the towns. A lot of times, I mean, this is the type of work that, you pay consultants a lot of money for. And we do have consultants that are assisting with analyzing the diff and working on the betterment. But I'll tell you what, the work that was produced in-house is consultant-level work, and it was really great to see. And So I just want to acknowledge Ed for that.
I had a question. I don't know if it's specific to you, Ed, or the others, but when the report was very informative and well-written and well-organized, and I really got a lot out of reading it, but the one funding source I'm not real clear on, and I don't know if it's that significant really, is the septic host fees. It says fees from the disposal of septic waste from private septic systems in the region. The fees could be used in the beginning of the project 5-year funding demand. So what exactly are those fees, and what's the
So the,
approximate dollar amount that they would generate?
what we've been charging is $300,000 per year as a septic host fee. And that fee is, there are a lot of trucks
Is
that
that
go
for
up
the
and down our-
commercial dumping of the
Yeah,
waste?
commercial dumps, they pump out the Title V septic systems. They drive on Yarmouth roads, come to the septic treatment plant, and dispose of at the septic treatment plant. So we came up with a host fee concept to recognize that, wear and tear on our town, and we're utilizing that funding source for wastewater.
And that wouldn't take away from the operation and maintenance of that facility?
So, Jeff and I and some folks before Jeff came on board, we're set to lose about $360,000 per year in the septic facility, and we went through the septic facility over a number of years to really change how that operation was handled and run it more like a business. And we are now generating enough revenue to maintain an aggressive maintenance plan on that facility. So we were going to run into deficit because we needed to borrow $2.5 million just to keep the plant running. But through the changes, energy efficiency, new software, outreach to our septic haulers, we've been able to actually cover the ongoing maintenance costs, cover the host fee, and look to set aside funds in case we have to decommission that plant in the future. Other towns where they decommission a plant, they have to go to town meeting and get, perhaps $3 million to decommission the plant. We're looking to actually have that in our funds for the septic facility to do those types of things.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Ed and Bill, thank you very much for the presentation. It's actually quite extensive, and I will read it again and again and again. Nowhere in here that I could see is the money that we have in the bank right now. I think that would be important to show that we, where the dollars are for right now.
Yeah,
Am I missing that?
If you look all the way to the right in the cumulative
In column
funding and
21?
Yes, column 21. If you look where we are with the $2.16 million,
Yeah.
Plus anything we got from ARPA, the $4.1 or $2 million,
Okay.
we've got about $6 million and going up.
Okay. And of course, as these numbers become real versus estimates, this will obviously continue to be updated. I'm stating the obvious.
And you'll see 22 through 23 are real. Those are actuals.
Okay.
And then as you go down into 24 through 2055, those are estimates.
I'm disappointed you can't give me actuals for 55.
Yeah. And some of the assumptions, we got some good numbers from CDM Smith for the O&M.
Yeah.
I just did a series formula, and that was for about 20 years, and I just projected that out for the next several years. Again, that's speculative. It could be, it ramps up considerably based on the previous years, but, there are some things that, we can potentially do as it relates to O&M as well.
Okay.
And one of them is, we're looking to get the anaerobic digester, which has no revenue in this column. That should lower the disposal of the thickened sludge or the hopefully dewatered sludge that comes out of there, because we're going either to Cranston, Rhode Island, or upstate New York to dispose of those materials where we can do those locally. We were awarded $1.5 million from the Department of Energy for the anaerobic digester project. We have a letter of intent in that we were told to proceed on for $500,000 from the county. We also received green community money, and there's another fund of amount of state money. And the folks that originally bid on the plant, the RFP, they're now being funded by one of the top 10 private equity firms in the world, and they have first right of refusal on the Yarmouth plant. So it's increasingly likely that this will be built, and we're going to do it on a modular basis so that it can expand to take on more waste over time, lower cost at the beginning, and it can grow as the revenues also grow.
I mean, this is part of it. You talked about if this doesn't go through, there's the possibility that the DEP will come down and we'll have to do denitrification, if I'm saying that word correctly, through multiple individual septic systems. And I've seen a number of letters written by various towns and so on and so forth. Have we gotten anything back from got anything back from the DEP that, this is, our project is going to be acceptable, at least to hold the DEP off?
I'm gonna go to Bob on this because we had some discussion, as you recall, we had a draft letter.
Correct.
That went out, but in view of those very strong letters that were written by some off-Cape legislators,
Yeah.
Bob is gonna redo that letter and kind of incorporate a lot of that material.
Right, and it does bear some discussion because obviously, there's many facets to that proposed DEP regulations, and we're beginning to understand, some very serious problems associated with it. And we talked about it at a meeting. I mean, the number one problem with it, in order to apparently appease the called the Conservation Lawsuit Foundation, right? They have changed their model in those proposed regulations, and they're looking for us to achieve our water quality goals that are in the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan in 20 years as opposed to the 30 to 40 years that they've already approved. Now, we raised this issue directly with DEP. Time out. We have an approved CWMP, and some of the key substance of our input that we're going to incorporate strongly into our letter that a lot of the other legislators that have done letters, a lot of the other communities have pointed out that after we worked for 10 solid years and spent all of the money developing the comprehensive wastewater management plan that was approved and recommended by the DEP and also approved by the Cape Cod Commission to meet our 208 consistency with the overall environmental plan for the Cape, you can't all of a sudden hang a hard left turn and abandon that CWMP. And they need to address that in those proposed regulations. They need to address the CWMP. I can tell you that they're beginning to make statements that communities that are making progress, they'll work with, but it doesn't say specifically in the proposed regulations yet that the CWMP guidelines on the newly approved CWMPs will rule, and that's what we're looking for. So the thing that I want to make clear is that the regulatory environment that we're being thrown into now with all of these proposed new regulations is uncertain. However, based on that uncertainty, what we know and what they're starting to say now is that communities that are making progress implementing their CWMPs will be given the strongest consideration to change, that 20 years and let us go out some more, although it's not written in the regulations. But we do know communities that are not making progress in implementing the CWMPs are going to be subject to these regulations potentially without having the extensions. So what they're telling us is all you have to do, and they say, it says it in the regulations, the application for the watershed permit mirrors the CWMP, and you need to give us that information, and we'll make the, the best decision. And we're looking for some more certainty. And but make no mistake about it, one problematic portion of this whole environment is the impact of these 11th hour DEP regulations at a time where we're preparing to approve this project. But we hope to have some clarity there, and in any event, we absolutely know that we're going to be in better position than if we fail to meet the CWMP guidelines. So,
Bob, thank you.
Yeah, and you got to weigh that DEP threat, if you will, against further financial cost of delay, further environmental degradation, piecemeal approach to the solution of the nitrogen problem, and you're going to get a certain number of homeowners that are going to get caught in a situation where they have failed systems, and then they go get, like, say, a standard Title V system, and then the regulations come out if there's no town permit, and you say, well, you got to replace that, you got to upgrade that. And so with the comments, and I appreciate getting them from CDM Smith about these prior hearings that they've had. Somebody asked them, and I think I mentioned this at our last meeting, how much would one of those systems typically cost? And they gave them, they said something like 20 to 35,000. Well, they don't know. If somebody gives you that kind of an estimate, that means I don't know. You just look at the percentage, the range. And it's got to be like the best available technology at the time that the system's put in. So what is that going to mean? I mean, so people will be in a very, very perilous situation if the town doesn't get the comprehensive permit. So nothing's ideal, but I think you have to weigh the risks. And you have to balance the uncertainty of where you are with DEP versus inaction, and what can happen if you don't go forward. So I think that's where we are. Does anybody else have anything? Dan?
I just have one quick question. The presentation's excellent. It makes it understandable, if there's such a thing as understanding all of this stuff. But I'm curious, we understand now that DOT is running a little bit behind. Has this presentation taken into consideration the delay that's potentially out there if DOT doesn't go on a timeline that we originally projected?
Jeff might be able to probably answer that better, but the spreadsheet that shows the cost estimates has them in those cost estimates. You can see the DOT sections. So I don't know the breakout of what happens if they're not part of the project. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Jeff. I can move out of the way.
I'll stand here.
All right.
This does not fully show if the town were to do all of the contracts along Route 28 on our own, does not fully reflect that. But there are significant portions of this Phase 1 that we weren't doing with DEP, or DOT anyway. And because of that, there is still a concern about the slow progress that Mass DOT is moving forward with, but it's certainly not something we should be overly alarmed about yet. We have been having ongoing discussions with them. We met with them just a week or so ago, and we'll be meeting with them again right after the new year. There are several options on the table to continue to move forward with them, even if it's not with a comprehensive project, but maybe doing it in advance, a phased project, if you will, the utilities first, or some portion of the project first. That really is just one section of Route 28. It really is, the biggest concern is from the Barnstable Town Line to the Parkers River Bridge. We are fully moving forward, and everything is on schedule for the other Mass DOT project, which is the Bass River Bridge and the Four Corners intersection. And then in between, that was the section that we're doing on our own anyway. So it is something that we're certainly very interested in moving forward with DOT, and there is a significant cost savings for us to do that. But this does not fully analyze the fact if we had to move forward with that one section on our own. But we'll work through that if that does become a reality. And we'll know early in the new year, whether we need to make alternative plans or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First, let me just say one thing. Ed, this appears to be your last meeting with us as a board, and I just want to say thank you personally to you for all of your service to the town of Yarmouth. We know you're going on to take on some other challenges, and I want to wish you incredible success. We know you'll be successful helping Falmouth with their challenges, but you've been like 24/7 here in Yarmouth for the longest time, and your work ethic is unparalleled. You're always there, you're always on the ball, you've always been there whenever there's an issue, whenever there's a need, and it's an incredible amount of service and time and energy and effort that you've spent for this town. I know when I've sent you emails on Saturdays and sometimes in the wee hours, I'm shocked when I get a response. It could be at midnight, 1 in the morning, or whatever. You've just always been there for the town of Yarmouth. And I know I can speak for the entire board here, that we are definitely going to miss you. There's no way anybody can fill your shoes because they're huge. But we're going to do our best. And we know you're not that far away if we need you. We know we can always count on you because you've always been here for us when we've needed you, and you've done a remarkable job, and just really a huge thank you. I didn't want this meeting to go without us having a chance to say thanks. So now I've got some questions, and it may not be more, yes.
Thank you very much, and I've actually been given permission by Falmouth and probably by the town of Yarmouth to continue with the AD project, try to see that through to conclusion because it benefits both communities. So you may see me again.
That's great. That's good. I hope so. The question that I have, and this is going to be the question that is going to be increasingly evident to us, is going to be once we get into the new year and we talk about a warrant and an article and the costs, the questions that we're going to have to answer relate to how much does it cost me? I mean, I'm looking at phase 1. I'm looking at all the residences in phase 1, all the homes in phase 1, all the motels, all the restaurants. And at some point, we need to have an answer to folks in terms of how much it's going to cost them. And I'm just curious when we will have that kind of information for people.
So that might be the other thing that I keep on doing when I'm gone. That model that we talked about that combines the assessing data with the water data, along with some data files from our engineers, that looks to model out the betterment costs as well as the O&M cost,
Right.
or the water rate or sewer rate charges. So that's something I'm going to continue to look to maintain.
So at the moment, we don't know, but we're working on it.
Yeah, and the figures that
Aren't the betterments going to be based on usage?
they're based on the
There's a volume calculation, isn't there?
and the Title V standards for how much is the average usage per bedroom. And it looks like, a fairly reasonable number that we've been throwing around is approximately $7,500 per bedroom. And that's, we have those betterments are 30-year betterments that are going to be at very low interest. much lower interest and a much longer period of payback that you could ever achieve for one of those systems that's more costly to begin with. But that's a rough approximation, and based on the water usage, there's a conversion model that converts that to the commercial uses. But judging by what the standard Title V, they have flow allotments per bedroom. That's the type of ballpark that we're in.
Yeah, because I think the sooner, you know, like I said, once we get into the next year, this is the question that we're going to be hit with. I know, I mean, I'm looking at, I mean, some of my neighbors, that's the first thing I'm going to get asked is, okay, that you get the article in, it's 200 some odd million. I'm in phase one. What's my bill? What's my cost? And those are going to be the hard numbers to put together. I know sometimes it's helpful to put ballparks out there just to give people, but sometimes, you know, the more time we can spend crunching numbers and having some reasonable certainty, I mean, a range that we're comfortable with, I think that will be important. So otherwise, I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge for us to be able to really speak to this, you know, on the town meeting floor if people don't have an idea of what it's going to cost them, particularly if you're in phase one. So, and I don't want to, I know you guys are working on that, and I think that'll be helpful. I think the sooner we get that, the better. The other question I have is, you know, I'm really concerned about DEP insisting that our wastewater plan be accelerated and done over 20 years. Because, you know, I'm looking at this spreadsheet, and I'm looking at from 2022 to 2055, and this is just phase one. So this is phase one. So imagine on this spreadsheet what it's going to look like if we put in the costs of phase 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and having them all done within the years on this spreadsheet. You know, I think if I were having a meeting with the commissioner of DEP to talk about this, I would love to have that information. These are the 8 phases in and how they impact the people in the town of Yarmouth, because the reality is that these phases and the costs will begin overlapping at some point. So phase 2, so if we're calculating costs with phase 1, those costs will overlap with 2, and after a while, we could have a section in our financing, well, actually, we'll have at some point, we'll have, in the out years, 8 phases of financing packaged in there, and what that looks like. I mean, to me, that's a very scary financial analysis. But really, to do the job thoroughly, that's the kind of analysis we should at least be thinking about doing. Because again, it's a legitimate question. This is phase 1 of an overall program. What's the overall program going to cost us? And if DEP is insisting on having it done within 20 years, what does that mean to some of this stuff?
I just want to add a couple of points.
Yeah.
If DEP is telling us to put in innovative alternative systems because we can't do it in 20 years, and those will take out 65% of the nitrogen, but in some of the embayments, we need to take out, 80 to 90% of the nitrogen. We're going to have to put in a plant anyway, right? So those people that got IA systems probably going to have to hook up to a sewer because we haven't met the nitrogen reduction goals. So
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay away from that part of the. I mean, we could be here all night actually talking about all the different scenarios, and I appreciate exactly what you're saying. It's a very important point. But I just want to make sure that whatever we're presenting, we can defend.
And one thing I'd say about the cost to the homeowners is we're not increasing in this model. That's a last resort, their property tax. So they have to weigh not having their property tax increased with the betterments and the rate that they'll pay as well. So
again, the reason why I bring this up is that we need to be prepared to
point.
have answers to these questions. They're going to come our way. We need to have them well before town meeting. We've talked about a public education campaign. And these are going to be the challenging questions that we have to answer. What's it going to cost me? Now, the people that are impacted in phase one, that information they're going to insist upon. And then the question's going to be, as the folks that may be up for being impacted in phase two and phase three and phase four and on down the line, they're going to be asked, they're going to be obviously very interested in those numbers as well.
We can do that. Well, but what you can't do is you can't complete this whole plan in 20 years. I'll tell you that right now. So it can't be done. So that's a problem for DEP, and they'll have to govern themselves accordingly.
The reason why, Bob, I raised that is only to be able to showcase to DEP just how impossible. They're asking us to do the impossible. I mean, if we actually looked at financially what that would mean to the town of Yarmouth, we'd all be vacating.
And you wouldn't be able to drive in Yarmouth either, because every road would
Well,
be
that's
torn up.
right. So there's no question the alternatives that have been presented to us by the Conservation Lawsuit Foundation, I haven't heard that before, but I like that. But the alternatives that are being presented to us are just totally untenable on both sides. But there are some things clearly we need to do as a minimum, because if we're all focused on the spring, phase one, in town meeting, I think it's important for us to be able to at least articulate some of the questions that relate to finances that are going to come to us, and we need to think through how we're going to answer them. And so I'm just looking at my neighborhood, because I know I'm going to be hearing from people when I walk my dog. They're going to come out, and usually they come out and it's a very pleasant conversation, so I can just imagine what it's going to be like later on. But the point is all of our residents are going to want to know. So my hope is that at some point soon after the new year, we'll be able to get to some of this, and we will certainly appreciate your help in that. So thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I think in addition to the point Ed made about them weighing this being on the tax rolls versus a betterment where you're going to have it spread over many, many years at a very low cost, they also got to consider in their minds the cost of an INA system and doing it alone and fronting the money.
And the yearly maintenance.
Borrowing at a much higher cost with a very short-term payback period.
We did, several years ago, we did a model where we compared the different alternatives for wastewater, an IA system versus a cluster system versus a satellite system versus a single system, and even incinerating toilets.
My favorite.
To compare the cost of how to mitigate nitrogen. And the IA systems, when you go across the communities that need to do it, were far and away more expensive than doing a single plant.
Mr. Chairman, one other point that needs to be clarified. Scenario. I just put in a Title V, and I just spent $50,000. Am I going to have to hook up to this thing or not?
And where are you located?
Yeah, I'm not talking. I'm making a scenario. I can give. I can give you a real scenario.
He's not in a nitrogen-sensitive area.
In Provincetown, I financed two $100,000 Title V systems for restaurants. They put in the sewer system, and the town said, "You will hook up. You do not have a choice."
And it's going to be the same situation here. The only thing that, in the implementation program, there may be a relatively short period of time that you could delay, but the one thing that in benchmarking the previous financial models that have happened in our region, any of the systems that have adopted that checkerboarding where only a portion of the residents in a service area were forced to hook up were financial failures, and had followed up with special legislation to change that because their financial models didn't work. So in our case, if someone has to do a project, they may be able to have somewhat of a delay in terms of the exact deadline for connecting, but it will be imperative that those customers in the service areas do connect, and it won't be a checkerboard situation where you can choose, I'm in, I'm out.
No, my point exactly, the checkerboard systems do not work.
So we can clarify that point right now.
Anyone else?
Ed, again, thank you very much. You've been always very helpful.
Anything else you want to say, Bob, or?
No, I think that
Bill or Ed?
concludes it.
Just on the discussion about the 35 years, the first phase is paying for the plant. So all those WIF and all those other funds are really going into the plant. The DIF is going into the plant. So you're really taking all that revenue to cover something that some of the future phases won't have to cover. They'll be looking at predominantly collection costs. And on the individual septic systems, I think it's important that homeowners should know you're really removing sort of the income you would make when you sell your house, that you're going to have to pay off the debt for the nitrate system, whereas if you're part of the wastewater system, other than the connection fee, it is a betterment fee and the O&M 25% charge that you'll have to pay, and that could be passed on to the next homeowner. So your proceeds of sale, you're going to lose it because you will have debt for your nitrate system, but you won't have that much cost for the connection as you would a nitrate system. So people planning on selling their home in the next 10 years, are going to lose that proceed of sale if they put in a nitrate system or a good part of it.
I had a situation like that years ago. There was a young lady that I had coached when she was many years younger that was buying a home in Wareham. And it had a sewer betterment that was attached to the property. And so I said, on her behalf, you got to pay that because that's a debt you incurred. Let's say there was 10 years left on it or 15 years. And they said, no, we've owned it for this portion, and now she's going to own it for this portion. So, I mean, that's the way it works, and it's negotiated. And so she really wanted the house. She ended up buying the balance of the betterment because the seller wasn't, willing to do that. But he had paid probably 2/3 of the cost during the time that he owned it. But that's what you're going to get into in that kind of situation. There's no real rule of thumb on that. It'll be, if it's a seller's market, they'll probably, remain tough until the buyers, they're going to have to assume the balance of it. If the market reverses, they're probably going to have to make concessions on the price. That's how the free market controls those kind of issues. So. But anyway, well, thank you very much. We appreciate the information, and we look forward to working with you guys going forward. And Ed, I echo Mark's comments. We thank you very much. We're deeply indebted to you for all the services that you've provided to the town, especially through the tough years, the crisis years. To get the town in a good, strong financial position. We know you've worked tirelessly, and you've always had Yarmouth's best interest in mind, and we really are thankful to you for everything you've done, and we wish you well going forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Take a picture here. Hang on. Don't, you guys stay there.
With the board. If the board chooses a photo op with Ed, if you don't mind.
You guys sit there. Let's get a couple of shots. And are we going to take one with the board?
The board wish just a
Yeah,
photo op
but
with Ed.
Mark stepped out.
Well, when Ed and Mark comes back.
Yeah, Mark, I don't know where Mark went. He probably went to get a cheeseburger.
Yes. He man about a
He's
horse.
vacuuming.
No, I don't know where he went.
Here he comes. Oh, we've got a photo op with Ed.
after.
Historic moment.
Happy holidays, everybody.
See you, David.
I know. Mr. 24/7. Mr. Round the clock.
That's beautiful, guys. The town seal there.
Peter Johnson stopped his pen here.
Thank you guys very much. That's a nice shot.
We wish you well.
Thank you very much.
We'll be reading the Enterprise on a regular basis.
That's a good idea, town report.
Hopefully I'm not in it. 'Cause
You
it's
are
not always
already.
good news.
I saw you. I read all about you the other day.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Okay.
The vehicle policy.
Moved around.
Now, this I'm keeping. This I'm keeping. I mean, this is really.
What do vehicles?
I'm looking for my agenda. I don't know where the heck I put it. So, next item.
What did I do with mine?
Vehicle policy.
Vehicle policy? Vehicle policy update? Thank you.
And the board members have a draft municipal vehicle use policy. It was an item that came up before the board, asked us to look at that. And this is designed, it's a fairly comprehensive policy designed to consolidate and replace the previous policies that the board had adopted, which were very short, and had just tried to cover small areas, but never comprehensively addressed vehicle usage. And so some of the key items that we tried to address through this vehicle policy is the manner in which all of the vehicles of the town are purchased, managed, the garaging of vehicles, how vehicles are assigned to individual employees. There are specific rules on, right now what we're trying to do is to avoid or limit vehicles that are non-public safety that are assigned for 24-hour uses, which would mean commuting purposes, people going back and forth to work. And there are also strict guidelines from the IRS that the town needs to follow in the event that it does assign vehicles for commuting purposes. And those are all detailed in this policy, the reporting, how that works. There are all of the general vehicle use regulations, operation and maintenance regulations, the things about the speed limits, the safety restraints, rules of the road, controlled substances. All of these in a written policy saves the town money on our insurance, that there's actual best management practices that are baked into this. And interestingly enough, another major portion of these was what we originally started off looking at, but obviously when you address municipal vehicles, there are so many different areas that you might have to cover. But one of the things we started off with analyzing the marking and identification of the municipal vehicle fleet. And we have some guidelines that are presented in the policy that are actually, and I give Bill Scott, tremendous credit, had put together some mock-ups for what our new system would work like. And what happened, it's really the necessity that was the mother of this invention of having a new look for the town appearance of the town cars. And we have a general protocol that vehicles were going to be dark green. And so that matches a lot of the DPW vehicles. And now all of a sudden in our post-pandemic environment, we've run into some significant problems getting green cars. They're not made anymore. It is possible to get a green car, but you have to order it direct from the factory in a special order in that color. and it has to be done at the factory, or else you could buy a car aftermarket and take it out and get painted. But there is a pretty large premium for paying extra to get vehicles that are painted green. In addition to that, they're not available. There is a tremendous wait time for those. What we found in looking at the state bidless vehicles, which the way we like to purchase them, it's the best pricing for the town. The colors are very limited. The one that's plentiful that you can get is the white vehicles. I think the white is a very sharp vehicle. It would provide, I think, better visibility on the street and also some sense of uniformity. And you could see working with adhesive banners that are manufactured locally at a local sign shop. Each one of the town departments would have the markings, in addition to the town seal, the departmental markings with a color code on their vehicles. So you'd have Public Works would have one color code, and the Water Department, instead of having a blue vehicle, would have a blue banner along the side that would indicate that that's a Water Department vehicle, and similar, with the building, health, all of our vehicles. So that's the proposal in here. It's not required that you adopt it. It's the best suggestion that we could come up with. We've worked with the town departments, and we think all of the departments are willing to go ahead with this. Bill's got some more.
Just on the markings, I mean, one of the keys is visibility. I mean, a lot of these crews are out there early in the morning at, dawn, or out there at dusk, and dark green vehicle under tree cover, up against green vegetation on the side of the road. I remember driving down Union, and the only distinguishing factor I could see in the vehicle was the employee getting out with the vest on, they're very difficult to see under dark conditions. The white vehicle and those bands are meant to be 3M reflective, is going to help quite a lot when they're out on the road, when they're plowing and things like that.
So are those bands exactly like they show here? They're going to be all different colors for the different departments?
Yeah, we have several mock-ups. One that has a band all the way across, and then sort of underneath the seal, which has a bigger band, and then the name. And then there are also there's a typical cross-hatching. You might have seen it on the back of utility vehicles, which has a definitive gray and red band for reflective. So we want to take a look at that to make these vehicles safer when they're out in those, dimly lit conditions. So there's going to be a distinct advantage of that. And as Bob's point, everybody makes a white truck. So not everybody makes a green truck in that particular color. I mean, they may call it snow white or ice white or whatever, but it's still a white truck. So when we've been looking, it's been easier to find them. There have been more in stock in that. So we have some sign companies, or actually the companies that sell these would do custom graphics for us. And our goal is to be able to distinguish between departments while you're on the road. So a person that sees the green band isn't thinking that it's a public works vehicle, it's a DNR or a recreation vehicle or a conservation vehicle. They see the yellow band, it is part of the public works division. So, but the important aspect is that with those type of markings, with a white truck, they're going to be more highly visible and safer out on the roadway.
Yeah, the concern I would have, and this isn't me, this is input that I've received from some others that are contractors. They said, well, why do you want white vehicles? How do you think you're going to see them in the snow? That's why I'm asking about those additional markings. So,
I mean, typically they would have their lights on up above the roof, then the markings would be there, the reflective nature would be there, and so.
So on this, in the packet, you have, and I just want to get this straight in my mind. For example, let's start with, and I know this isn't written in stone, so to speak. Look at the yellow with the Yarmouth Public Works. So anything in Public Works will have that yellow.
Correct.
Each department will have distinctive markings.
Right, I mean, so,
Particular to that department?
Correct.
so that department is Public Works, but it might say sanitation on the same one that has yellow, because that's from Public Works. So,
Yeah, but it'd be the same color.
right, right.
So all the subdivisions, if you will, of Public Works would have that same yellow strip.
Correct,
So we could recognize what department they're from readily by
correct.
the color. So, all right, I get it. So the water department is in blue, and there's like a maroon color for the building department.
I mean, yellow is a typical Public Works color. The other ones are things that we can take a closer look at in terms of what the color schema is. But most of the natural resource type departments, we also have a color arrangement for small SUVs that might be, some of the inspectional or other vehicles. So, but they will follow the color scheme. So, but conservation, natural resources would be, green, inherent with, the trucks
Get it.
they might drive.
So the key thing is what we're looking for is a uniform and professional standard that is high visibility through the reflective banners, but also accessible in the market and doesn't add cost to the vehicles, and looks good, and that everyone can live with that. And just to wrap up the policy, in addition, the other key element of it is that this reflects the energy efficiency purchasing, and specifically, the policies associated with the State Green Communities Act, which we're a member of, and we've also, used their funding to get energy efficient vehicles. So it's a nice modern policy that for the first time introduces the energy efficiency and the Green Communities Act into our purchasing directly. So, and I want to say it doesn't need to be adopted on an emergency basis or anything, but we wanted to give it to you, have you look at it, weigh in, and maybe we'd like to see it approved early in the year, and that we have some purchases that we haven't been able to find green trucks. We think we can get some white ones if it was an approved policy that would enable us to work with the departments, move ahead. And I think the key with the departments is it's been a tough haul since 2021 to try to get even a hold of trucks. And so we've got a few on the backlog that we've funded we'd like to replace before the costs, go through the roof.
Just on a quick and dirty, I just went to Ford Build a Truck. White is free, and some of the other colors are up to $650 per vehicle, and there's no green is available, just as a by the by.
No green?
No green's available, at least currently. BRG, British Racing Green, used to be very common.
That's the name of our green,
Yeah, it was BRG.
BRG.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any concerns about just approving this policy tonight?
No.
I don't think we have to, and I think we should look at it and read it. And one of the concerns, not a concern, but a question I had was on under 2.24 at the bottom. It says if an employee is arrested for or charged with a motor vehicle offense for which the punishment includes suspension or revocation of the motor vehicle license, they have to notify their superior. I didn't see anything in there about notifying the superior if there was any temporary revocation of a license. For example, on an OUI, if you don't, you might not be convicted, but if you don't take the breathalyzer test, there's an automatic suspension. Or if you fail, fail a breathalyzer test and do take it, there's a suspension of license, even while your case is pending. So I think there should be a provision in there that says if the license is suspended, they'll immediately notify the supervisor. Not just whether they're arrested of a crime, the outcome of which can result in a suspension. Do you see what I'm saying? In OUIs, they have temporary suspensions of licenses based on A, whether you failed to take a breathalyzer, or B, if you took one and failed it.
No, that's a good point, and maybe we could tweak that language. It's designed to mean that, like some of the offenses, you get your license suspended on the spot. Then you Then you were charged and go to court. And what we need to know, if you get stopped and your license is suspended, we have to know right away. And so that needs to be clearer. That needs to be
Yeah,
clearer.
well, this talks about being charged with an offense,
That's
which...
potential in the future, but what if you lose your
carries-
license?
Yeah, but
You
there
need-
can be an, what I want to say, an interim remedy legally, where you lose it pending, I mean, you could lose it for failure to take the breathalyzer and ultimately win your case.
Correct. But you don't,
In the
but you still
meantime, you
don't
can't
have it in
drive.
the meantime.
You can't drive. And you won't know whether that employee can drive or not unless they report it to you.
That's a good
Or unless you
point.
unless you read it in the paper.
So that needs to be clarified, because that's definitely the intent that,
No, I understand that. If you intended for them to notify you of the mere possibility of losing their license, then it stands to reason that you would all the more want them to tell you if there was an actual suspension of the license.
Taking that one step further, is there disciplinary action then is that policy somewhere else, the disciplinary action that would follow for an employee that is obviously drinking on the job?
It says convict, for example, it does say later on in the same paragraph I was talking about, conviction for such an offense may be grounds for loss of municipal vehicle privileges and/or further disciplinary action. And I think you gotta handle that stuff on a case-by-case basis, really.
you have to have a hearing.
Well, for example, if somebody lost their license temporarily, let's say for failure to take the breathalyzer, and then they went to trial and they won the case, I think you'd be hard-pressed to impose discipline in that situation, because they were ultimately exonerated. However, if they were found guilty, then there's gonna be a license suspension anyway. And they're not gonna be able to drive, and the town may say to them, depending on the town's needs, you're done, or you're on administrative leave or whatever. I guess it's gonna depend upon the needs of the town and the track record of the employee. So, but, I asked Bob if we needed action on this tonight, and he said, no, we just want to get it going, to read it. I haven't read it in great depth, but that's one of the things that I saw. I'm sure there's probably some other suggestions that we can make as we go along. I don't want to be difficult, but another thing I read was that the employees that are allowed to take vehicles home with them for various reasons have to park them in safe locations. Now, I understand that's hard to define, but is there anything, I mean, can we say they won't park them on the street? They'll park them off street? I don't know. What preserves the safety of a town vehicle? I'd say if you leave it in the road, that's probably not the safest location, especially if you have a driveway. I don't know. Just, I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing out some things to think about. That just jumped out at me when I was taking a cursory look at this.
Do we still
There's a
issue
lot of good stuff in here about,
We still issue
a lot of
pages.
prohibitions
pagers?
in terms of
A lot of stuff that should be
not
common
using
sense.
the vehicles for personal reasons and keeping them clean, reporting any kind of mechanical issues or maintenance issues. I don't know if there's anything in here, but there probably should be that, it could be grounds for suspension if they use a town vehicle in the commission of a crime. Suppose somebody wants to run down a police officer or...
At least a stern talking to.
Suddenly see
Stern talking to.
a bank robbery with a town truck outside. Here's the getaway car. Yeah, that would be.
Believe it or not, I had a client once that was married to a police officer, and they had this big argument in the driveway. And she didn't run him over, but she told him to get out of the way. and he didn't, so she ran his foot over.
Oh,
Just
wow.
his foot. But they charged her with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. But you can, I mean, you don't, it doesn't have to be a bank robbery. That's an example where they use a vehicle improperly for commission of a crime.
Yeah, improper
I just have
use.
visions of that when you said.
You know, some people, when they say, "Get out of my way," they mean it. So,
Item 22.22, third bullet down, issuance of a pager. Does the town issue pagers anymore?
22.22?
Yep.
Unfortunately, yes, we have a pager in the water department
Oh,
that is
interesting.
used for the on-call.
Okay.
And, you know, it's an interesting type of a situation that, just, you know, so everyone knows that the whole pager industry has been replaced by the cellular telephone, which has the software that, you know, works in conjunction with that, and it's a much better system. There are some employees who refuse to use their, you know, personal cell phones in the conduct of their duties, and they're provided, we have a pager for them. They can, so that we still have a pager, but we're trying to eradicate those.
So,
Does the town also fill the vehicles with town diesel? Do we have town diesel?
Yes.
Because it only discusses gasoline. I'm on page 22.23, item number 7. Gasoline
could
is supplied
maybe
exclusively.
Put fuel.
Yeah, fuel is, yeah, that's a
2.23, right? Yeah, 7. Gasoline supply exclusively through the town facility.
Again, I read this quickly, so there may be some more things. Item number 2.24, almost at 2.25, it says, "No employee may use a municipal vehicle for out-of-state youth without advance written approval." Written's not there, and every other place you've asked for, you've said written in the line, just to be sure.
And we have a form for that, so we should, let's add written.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
And I agree with the chairman. I did read this. I read it Sunday. I looked it over again this afternoon, but I think I need to go line by line, not to nitpick, but just to, you know, see some stuff.
Absolutely, and
No, I mean, it's basically pretty good. It does address a lot of different issues, but we probably could, you know, think of a few things that might be helpful to add.
On the vehicles, white, I'm wondering about ambulances in the fire department. Are those exempt?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So this doesn't apply to the fire vehicles and the police vehicles. They have their own color schemes.
Okay. I mean, that makes good sense to me.
Is there a percentage of these town vehicles that are allowed to go home with the employee?
Yeah, I think right now we're around 0. There are a few for on-call personnel, but very few. And I think that this helps. What we want to do is we want to avoid a scenario where we've got a lot of vehicles that are running around for commuting purposes.
Yeah.
So part of them is acknowledging the IRS rules that apply to that.
Right, no, I saw that in there. That's good, yeah. That was good. And also protecting them against imputed income in certain situations where it's kind of like a requirement of employment.
Right, exactly.
That's addressed too, which is good.
Why do we have a granny knot on her? I never noticed that before. That's a granny knot.
I didn't realize, though, that green trucks were hard to get, and you had to pay a premium to get a special order on that. Are these trucks, or some of them, gonna be equipped with plows?
Yes.
would we then put this on our January 10th agenda to formalize?
Yeah, I think so, and I would also invite, if you see something in there that could use a tweak or an improvement, send me an email, and I'll try to, make some improvements so that, we get a better product on the 10th. I appreciate
Yeah, I think it's basically pretty good. I just think maybe a few additional things we might be able to come up with.
So, Mr. Chairman, should we move on to the next item?
I think so. I think that's all we can do with that for now. The next item will be board and committee actions, starting with the resignation of Susan Loveland from the library board and the library planning committee.
Motion to accept Ms. Loveland's resignation.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept with thanks her resignations. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's unanimous vote. Now, the next one is the appointment to the planning board of Ken Smith.
Right. As a regular member of the town of Yarmouth's planning board, the appointment will be for 3 years, unexpired term which will run through July of 2025.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That carries unanimously. We go to Old Kings Highway Committee, Richard Ventrone, is it?
Entrone, correct.
Ventrone. Tell us about that appointment.
Mr. Chairman, I would point out that a year ago, the board did vote not to renew Mr. Richard Gagan's position as the building contractor architect position on the board. And I've had a number of individuals in the community that have come forward to recommend Mr. Ventrone, who did put in a talent bank form. Mr. Ventrone is a licensed architect, currently the architect for the town of Barnstable, and has previous experience working for Preservation Society of Rhode Island, of Newport. So he is recommended by me to be appointed as the regular member of the Town of Old King Highways Committee. The appointment is for the building contractor architect position. It is for a 1-year term, which will run through December of 2023.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's unanimous.
May I also suggest, Mr. Chairman, that Mr. Ventrone's position is, the previous individual in that position was Richard Gagan, who served the board for over 25 years, as I understand it, on Old Kings Highway. May I suggest we send a letter of thanks to him for his service to the town?
I think we're all in agreement that we'll do that, right? Yes, we will do that.
I'll
That
work
will
on
be
getting
done.
that out. Thank you.
Now we have the minutes of March 9th of 2021 is next.
Chairman, I make a motion to approve. March 9, 21.
Okay, Dan moves for approval of the March 9th minutes. So I have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, Mark will second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
I abstain, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, how about you, Peter? You,
I think you need another vote by necessity.
well, let's see who was here. Tracy was here, Eric was here, no longer there. I was there, Dan Horgan was there.
And Mark was there.
That's it? Yeah, you're gonna,
I'll vote by necessity.
okay. All those in favor, or say it again, we got one, an abstention, I'm voting aye.
Aye.
Dan's aye.
Aye.
And Mark's aye, okay. So we have,
I don't think
Four?
you need the vote of necessity.
You've got my
do we
vote.
have any abstention other than Dorcas on this?
No.
Okay, so we got a 4-0-1 on this, right? All right.
You don't have to vote.
Oh, I don't have to, if I don't have to vote, I will abstain then.
Want to abstain too? Okay, so we have a 3-0-2 abstention then.
Yep.
On March 9th. Oh, wait, let's go to December 6th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? So that's a unanimous affirmative vote on the minutes of December 6th. We go to upcoming agenda review. Next. And our next meeting is the 10th. We have recognition of retirees. Brian Zgoda and Ed Centeo. We have a discussion on there of active shooter training, which Mark brought up last meeting.
Yep.
We have a hearing on golf fees. Have they been, is there any publication on those fees at all? I haven't seen anything. What's going on with the golf fees?
We haven't put them together yet, so it might be premature for that agenda.
Sounds like that, because there's got to be advertising on that.
Right, right.
So that's going to go off the list.
Yeah, we were,
Meeting for
we just
January.
finished up the budget with the town administrator this morning, so we'll take a closer look at the
I get it. A lot of these
fees.
are placeholder items, and you just got to move them around. All right, so that is going to be off.
We just discussed having the vehicle policy.
Yeah, we'll put the vehicle policy back on, so the board will have a chance to give it another look. And there's no urgency, as I understand, to that anyway, right?
Right.
Okay. So, what else? Anybody have anything else on that? Are we gonna do a little, we're gonna have some prep for the fire interviews on that date?
Yes, we should put that on.
Let's put that in there.
Yeah,
That be an executive session?
No.
The prep, just as in the regular? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to put it on there and publicly review the questions.
What did we do with the police? I don't
That
recall.
We distributed the questions, and then we met just prior to make sure that we had the assignments nailed
Did we
down.
do an executive session on that?
No.
No, we did not.
No, it has to be in the,
Yeah.
in public.
I don't see any need for that, do you?
Well,
We're
we,
not addressing any
Right.
particular,
What, to meet in executive session? No, I don't think we can.
I don't think we
No,
can
I
either.
think
because
we're violating the open meeting law.
It's not a,
Under the open meeting
it's not an
law,
employee that we're reviewing or anything like that. We're
Yeah.
talking about generic questions.
yeah, under the open meeting law, we can, there can be a screening committee that can meet privately.
Correct.
But not us in
Yeah,
interviewing
like
the
we
finalists.
did when we interviewed the town administrator. Remember that? We did the search.
Exactly.
A lot of those preliminary interviews were not
Right.
public.
Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be, I thought when we did the questions, that was done in executive session, so the individuals who might be part of the interview would not know the questions ahead of time.
Oh, in terms of handling the questions, well, we certainly had the consultant prepare them,
Yeah.
and then we were given them, but we didn't have a public discussion on them.
No, that's why I said we had a
We were in executive session when we did that.
just to
don't recall
go over
that.
the questions themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it was indicated what we were doing, it was outlined
I
that,
think we did that because the primary purpose of the executive session was related to it, but that wasn't central to it.
Was that because all the candidates were current employees of the town?
No, we were in executive session because I forget exactly what the nature of.
Yeah, it wasn't the final, once we hit the finalists, I don't think we had another executive session, but,
No, when we interviewed the individuals, that was all very much in public.
Right.
I'm just talking about
All the interviews would
no.
be,
just putting together the questions to be given.
Done by the consultant for us.
It was done by the consultant for us, and they were,
We had the questions at the meeting, where we did the interviews.
yeah, well, didn't we have them, didn't we get them ahead of time, discuss them a little bit ahead of time? In private, so the individuals would not be able to see what the questions would be.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
I'll tell you what we'll do.
That's
We'll-
common.
I don't know if we would need to check with council if we can, if we can go into an executive session for that purpose. I don't think it's an
We'll
allowable.
look into that, and if we can, then we'll schedule it as an executive session, otherwise it'll be in public, okay?
Yep,
So
not a
we'll-
problem.
We'll resolve that.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Thanks for bringing that up. We'll check it out with town council, and we'll make the appropriate call on that. So, we're on the 10th. Anything else on the 10th?
Mr. Chairman, we have finished the CIP process as far as the capital budget committee, and it's gone to the finance committee. We started a new step this year. It will go to finance committee, and with the town administrator and finance director, they'll work out the debt schedules and then how much we'd fund, and then it goes back to capital budget. So we could do an interim report on capital budget at sometime. I don't know if the 10th is the best date. And we can show you the new process and some of the objectives and policies that they're looking at.
might be
Well,
great.
That looks like a good thing to put in there.
Yeah.
How about on the 24th for that? Because
That
golf's
sounds
gonna
good.
go off again. We have nothing
Yeah.
on the January 24th. We have a holiday on the 17th. I don't think we should load up the 10th, and we should spread it out. Why don't we put that on the 24th?
Mr.
right,
Chairman, I'd like to suggest that maybe in discussions between you and the town administrator, we work out a more expansive schedule of budget-related meetings, because we're gonna wanna get police, fire, DPW. I mean, I'm glad Bill brought up the capital budget, but we should probably be getting into the overall budget presentation, picking a date for that, right? And then a host of
One
other.
the things I wanted to talk about is, I think it might be a better process to have a general, like a budget night, as opposed to having individual departments come and, take up your entire agenda to have a walkthrough and have department heads here, walk through the town budget, go over the highlights of individual departments. That might be a great night to do.
Just have one night,
Have like a
everybody's here?
workshop, yeah, and then see if there's things that you want to drill down on and have repeats, but to.
How about if we have a budget presentation on the budget night, and then based on that discussion, the board may decide to zero in on one or two departments, or maybe a whole bunch of departments?
All right, when do you think we could have a general overview on the budget, Bob?
We can do it January 10 or January 24 might be a good night.
Let's do 24.
24 budget.
Is that too late? Is that okay?
You rather do 10, would you rather?
It's just, we're getting way down, I think one of the things that Bob has, as an administrator, he's done that's been fantastic.
Is
is-
getting ahead of the curve.
He's getting ahead of the curve, yeah.
Question.
I'm a little bit nervous about getting behind the curve.
All right.
Bob has been great on
can do it for
getting
the- on the-
warrant done
January
early.
10?
Huh?
We can do January 10.
Will you be ready?
Sure.
Then let's put it on the 10th then, okay. So we'll do a general budget review, all right? And then we'll go from there.
If I may, the Finance Committee actually does individual meetings with the departments, and we use a standard presentation to keep some consistency. So then that goes to Zoom video, which we can make available.
Yeah, but as Mark says, things could come up where you'd want an individual presentation, depending on if there's any nuances or any big changes. I'm not saying there will be.
Now,
We'll see.
there are some towns that literally will get the finance committee and the select board in the same room in one day with plenty of coffee and donuts. This is
Cuts down on the number of meetings for me.
Harwich did it. So I stole the idea from Harwich when I was the interim in Brewster. We did it there. So we took a Saturday, literally, plenty of coffee, plenty of refreshments, brought in a lunch, And we just had and what was nice, what I loved about it was just the collegiality. You know, we're in the same room with the finance committee. These are people that serve the town. We're all hearing the same presentations, asking the same questions. And everybody that participated found it very helpful. Now, I'm comfortable doing it with whatever way you want, but I do know that since we started that in Brewster, they have stayed with it. And that's what they do. They'll pick a Saturday in January, and they'll literally have everybody in. Now, that obviously, it requires some sacrifice by department heads and the other people involved, but it seemed to work. And like I said, it's a practice they're now continuing. So Harwich had the idea. I heard great things from the Harwich Selectmen and Finance Committee about it. And so we tried it in Brewster, because I think one of the things that we're trying to promote is a good dialogue. You know, sometimes we really don't interact with the Finance Committee members much at all, but you get some really talented people on that board. And there's some value sometimes in everybody hearing the same thing. And then having their Q&A, and we can all benefit from it. And then you've got one day, and you're doing the whole thing, and then it's over with. In fact, sometimes they go so well, you can even get done early. So I just put that out there as a suggestion. You know, otherwise, doing it the way we've suggested is fine too. I'm just saying there are other options out there, and that's one that some towns really enjoy doing. Again, it's plenty of refreshments. You're in here on a Saturday, you know, and it works.
I mean, if I may, the Finance Committee would hold a series of about 4 meetings with all the departments instead of that. I mean, so it kind of cuts down on the number of meetings. They usually, at least from my experience, and well, limited is, like to hear from each department. So if that methodology has that incorporated, you're cutting down on a number of meetings.
Oh, yeah. No, what happens is the departments, they're, not all the departments, but a number of department heads, the big department heads, they come in
Right.
and make their presentation, and, you know, each board convenes their meeting. They do their call to order, the meeting's convened, then they have finance committee questions, then select board questions after the presentations are made, and everybody's taking notes. And in those situations, what I found helpful was just being in the same room with the other board and hearing the same facts, asking the, you know, letting people benefit from knowing the other questions that others have asked. So, and the department heads actually liked it, because instead of having to go through one round of meetings with one board and then another round of meetings, everybody could get it over with really quickly. So I put that out there. I would be totally comfortable with it, finding a Saturday to do that. But again, that might require a little bit more time in terms of planning and vetting out how it might work with the departments. But you definitely want to have police, fire, DPW, and they're the sort of the divisions that exist within it. And then after that, pick and choose what other ones you might want to put in. But that's another option. But
If you're done, I've got something
I'm done.
else. Okay. On the January 10th, because I believe the last date we can get the letter into the DEP is the 20th, so could we have the letter on the 10th if possible? The updated letter?
No, I think it's the end of the month, isn't it?
I thought it
Comment
was
period?
January 20th.
I thought it was the end of January, but we can definitely have the letter ready.
Because one of the letters I saw that said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah, I
That
thought
was
that was a
Eric
great line.
Turkington.
Was
Yeah, I
Eric
think we're on the
Turkington's
menu.
comment.
I don't think we're at the table.
That's a good one. That was, Eric Turkington said that. I give him all the credit in the world. It's-
Eric's always been good at turning a phrase.
Yeah.
Well, see how you go with the letter. I mean, if you can do it on the 10th, fine. If you can't, then we'll do it on the 24th.
Yeah,
Right now, we have nothing on the 24th.
I was thinking the drop dead date was the 20th. It's the end of the month. The 24th is
It's the
fine.
end of the month,
Yeah.
yeah. So, anything else? Okay. Let's go to individual items, starting with Mark.
No, I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman.
Dan,
No, thank you.
Dorcas,
No, I don't, thank you.
Peter,
No.
Okay, I do. I'm going to wish everybody a happy holiday, a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever, holidays people celebrate. I hope they are happy ones, and I hope everyone has a healthy new year. This is going to be our last meeting of this year. Then we turn the page to 2023, and hopefully some good things will be happening with DEP and wastewater and all kinds of other good things that we'll be discussing next year. That's all I have.
Mike, I was told you were bringing the champagne.
I am, actually. If you're going to be here on the 31st, it's going to be an executive session. 4:00 in the afternoon. Mark's got the donuts. He's a donut guy.
I'm not going to be on the 31st, sorry.
So,
But I'm out of here.
all right. So we did individual. Now, we are going to go to the town administrator for the consent agenda and updates.
Item is the approval for the town seal committee to insert a questionnaire in the town census, and there's a copy of that for you.
Is that a consent agenda item?
Yes. Well, it needs approval.
Yeah. So we can approve the consent agenda then, right?
Oh, let's see.
I'll
that
move the
was-
consent agenda, Mr. Chairman.
The only thing?
Want to approve a questionnaire insertion into the
Census, I think.
census mailing.
So I made a motion to put it on the
Second.
Is that the only thing on the consent agenda?
I think so.
Okay, motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's a unanimous vote. And now updates.
Just for some of the updates, I wanted to let everyone know that on December 9, Mark and I attended the meeting of the Cape and Islands Leadership Association, which was formerly the Selectmen's Association, and it was really a good session that they had interactively with a hybrid with DEP, and we took advantage of that to review with detail their proposed regulations, so some of the quotes and discussion that we actually even brought up tonight. And at that meeting, I made some rather expansive comments that were based on some of the discussion at the Selectmen's meeting, the concerns that we have, the issues that we discussed tonight regarding the comprehensive wastewater management plans, the lack of funding for these mandates that are in the new regulations. And I just felt, it's sort of at Mark's urging, what we provided some pretty good leadership for some of the other towns to consider. And I know Falmouth had some detailed comments that Doug Brown gave on behalf of that town. And when, we were done, the people at the meeting were applauding. And I think they really appreciated Yarmouth setting a stake in the ground and saying that, look, fair's fair, that we're ready, to go to town meeting and present your plan that we did collaboratively. You can't change it now. And so, a lot happened at that meeting, and a lot of people stood up and listened. And I think that the evolution of thought on Cape Cod is that, people are becoming increasingly fearful of these regulations and where they came from. And so I thought we helped to clarify that point for all of the Cape Cod towns. And it was at that meeting that the agency there, the leadership group, voted to ask DEP to extend that comment period, and they did. And I do think it's the end of the month, but I want to get double check that that point. But we've got some time, and I've held the letter. And I have it, so we can do that letter at the next meeting. It's no problem. But it's been fascinating to me that we've seen the new letters come in from some of the off-Cape legislative delegation and selectmen, and some of the on-Cape people as well. So I've got some more great ammunition to kind of add to that. And I think that there's a lot of problems that are really becoming apparent with those proposed regulations. And we'll have to see how this evolves, but it'll be important to continue to follow that process. But I do think our community is showing some leadership with the other towns. I've met with the Cape Cod managers and, you know, had similar discussions. And so I think that we're all starting to think together on that. So that's pretty important.
If I can just chime in, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to thank Bob for stepping up, and he actually was the show at the association meeting. He literally got everybody zeroed in and focused in on it, and the regulators that were there were clearly paying attention. My hope is that when we do end up with the final letter, that we can talk a little bit about the money and the financial impact. I think Bob has made a point that we can't lose sight of, and that is that at one time $200 million for our region was promised, or at least put out there, dangled as an incentive, and I think that's almost like as a minimum. One of the things that I think we should recall is that when the Conservation Lawsuit Foundation insisted on compliance with the Clean Water Act in the greater metropolitan Boston area, that at the end of the day, the amount of financial assistance that accrued to the impacted municipalities was somewhere close to 50% of the funding.
Wow.
All right, 50% of the funding to implement came from state and federal sources. Now, I believe the Cape should, at a minimum, be treated equally like all the other communities in the Commonwealth that have been impacted by these requirements. And in spite of the best efforts of our legislators and others to advocate for more funding, we're far from being anywhere near the 50% in direct funding from the Commonwealth and the federal government. Now, the federal assistance is actually coming to the state, and then it shows up in the revolving loan fund. So it's still
Federal money.
Still federal money. It's characterized as a loan. I mean, I guess the other way you could call that money grant money is if most of the funding or half the funding we got had principal forgiveness. And that's another way to make it work. But I clearly think that our letter should speak loudly and strongly, and hopefully we can get the other towns to do this, is that the need for more state financial assistance. I'll tell you, it's been very frustrating over the past few months following the deliberations of the legislature and how to spend the $3 to $4 billion that's sloshing around in surplus funds, and they're debating or acting or not acting. And, you know, that's some of that's money we definitely need here on Cape Cod, and as a matter of equity, some of that's money we're entitled to. So Bob really hit on this early on, and I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of it, that money is an important part of this. And you know, the more that we can be close to that figure, the more it ultimately means that the betterment costs, the diff costs, the other costs are more in keeping with, I mean, I think it's far more compelling an argument to make that the amount of assistance that we're getting is the same as others, and that other users have been paying proportionally the same. But if we're being singled out and not necessarily getting the funding that we should be getting, then to some degree it's a burden that's not only on us, but it's on our own taxpayers and our own ratepayers and our own residents that are financing this burden. So I think to some degree we need to continue to press that message, and we should be treated just like every other community that's been impacted by the implementation of the Clean Water Act.
I agree, and I think it's very important to have representation at that meeting, so I want to thank Bob and Mark for being there and representing the town at that meeting.
Well, we'll continue to follow it very closely, and I also wanted to just, you know, let folks know that, again, I mentioned at the last meeting, we've been involved in the budget process over these past several weeks. It's a very intensive process, the way I work it with spending a great deal of time with each and every cost center, the departments and the divisions, to go through their funding needs. And then it's only after that process, the dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, that we meet with everyone gets their own independent meeting to talk about, the direction of the department, the financing needs. It's not just about money, it's about the whole direction of the town. And I'm at the part of the process now where I begin to synthesize all of that information, and I have to come up with, and I will complete it, a recommended budget by the end of the year to the Board of Selectmen. And obviously, there's never enough money to do everything that we want to do, but I feel that, we have a great budget process in place, and the information that is going into it is really from the ground up with our added value to it. So I think you're going to see some real initiatives that are coming from departments that are, people that are working real hard to get things done. So I've got a good feeling about the budget process. Thanks very much for understanding, as my schedule during this time is just so filled with these meetings, but we've made great progress on it. I'm just about done with the individual departments, so now we'll be synthesizing things and preparing the recommendations between now and Christmas Eve, and that next week. So that's the budget, but we will have the recommendations in time to start taking a look, and January 10th we'll be able to start going through things with the board. And also, came up a little bit earlier tonight, I wanted to make sure that board members know that the airport environmental process has begun, and we're intensive into that situation as well. And the next really big thing is on January 5. There's 2 environmental meetings. There's one at 11, and I think another one at 6 p.m. I intend to attend both of those, along with the town's aviation consultant, Ronald Price, and he and I have been reviewing the material up to date. He has some substantive comments that are based on all of the information that he's been discussing with the board, the whole issue of the required runway lengths to just everything. And so he'll be here at the meetings, and then working on behalf of the town to have some substantive comments on the scoping for the environmental impact reports that are required at both the state and the federal level.
That's great.
And,
What's the deadline on input on those, file those reports? I mean, those comments?
comments, off the top of my head, I think it's around the 20th or so of January, so.
That's a
coming up-
pretty short period of time after those meetings.
Coming up quick, but it's not the entire process. Remember, I
It's
think
the
this is-
environmental,
This is just
part,
on the
isn't it?
first piece of it, the EIR part. It's the environmental review is a 2-year process, and they've got 3 critical studies they have to do. There's the MEPA, Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, and that's an environmental impact report. There's the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and that's environmental impact statement. They have to go through that. And then there's also, it's a development of regional impact under the Cape Cod Commission guidelines, so they'll need the DRI, and there's another hearing and another comment. But the first round of comments are due on the state process, I believe around the 20th of January. So it may be that we've got some airport material to look at on the 10th if he's finished with his comments.
That would be good.
So that's ongoing, and we've been at the other meetings too. I know, Mark's attended, but, so we get the full briefing on the scoping for the environmental reviews. So that'll be an ongoing process. We'll have to find a little more money too we're on like the second phase of our aviation consulting. We finished the first phase with the report. Now, we're gonna engage the consultant to assist in the environmental review. So we look maybe for a little extra funds for that.
It's been well spent. He's really helped us.
okay, good.
So that's just a smattering of some of the things that are going on
Yeah.
this week.
Before you conclude with your report, can I just
Sure.
make one comment? I'm wearing my county hat on this comment, sort of a county selectman's hat, two hats. For years, Barnstable County had supported this initiative, or this group called the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative. And that board had a bucket of money, somewhere in the vicinity of $300,000, $400,000. And each town was represented on the collaborative and typically had their top wastewater person on it, so that they can collaborate and sort of strategize on how the towns could work together to address wastewater challenges. Past couple of years, that organization has been dormant. And so the question that I'm going to be asking Bob, and then I'm going to be asking the board to at least have a brief discussion, maybe during a future town administrator's update, is the value of the collaborative and whether or not, as the county reviews whether or not it should continue to exist, because we have multiple county boards now dealing with wastewater. The other major one is the board that you have selected me to represent this board at, and that's the one that deals with the funding, the Cape and Islands sort of Clean Water Trust Fund. And that consists of selectmen and town administrators. But the collaborative largely had, like I would say, the top municipal wastewater person. In some cases, it was a selectman. In some towns, they sent their DPW director. In some cases, they might have sent somebody else who was their point person on wastewater. But literally what you had for the Cape are all the point people in each town on wastewater. And in 2017, there was some real question. There was an attempt to shut it down, and the towns all rallied and called on the county commissioners to keep this group going. But the past couple of years, some of it due to budget cuts and budget constraints, this organization has sort of become dormant. And the question that we're going to have to wrestle with next year is, does this group continue? Because the county's in the middle of a budget process. Should the county be putting more money back into this group so that it can continue to do its work that many towns did find very valuable, or is it time to let the group sort of phase out of existence, and maybe the county and the towns rely on this finance board to sort of speak as a region with one voice on wastewater issues? Because one of the things that's become evident to me is, as this Title V and DEP issue has come up, we've sort of struggled as a region to speak with one voice in terms to DEP and others about wastewater. You know, it's sort of each town has been sort of in on its own, whereas in the past, there was a lot of dialogue among the towns and there was a fair amount of collaboration, and the Cape could speak really convincingly as a region, you know, on some of these issues. So this is a question that we're debating. Do we keep the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, or do we allow it to sort of phase out of existence? So that's a question that we're going to be wrestling with early next year. And I'd like to suggest that after Bob and the Yarmouth team have had a chance to think about it, you know, we have a brief discussion during an upcoming town administrator's report as to collectively our thoughts. Because I think the board should at least take a position on whether or not it should continue to exist. Because back in 2017, most of the Cape towns really spoke out and defended its continued existence. I think part of the benefit was not only the collaboration, but the money. Towns were getting even modest chunks of money to look at very strategic, very critical issues related to analyzing, you know, nitrogen loading in a particular area, or coming up with other recommendations on how to address wastewater. So give that some thought.
What's the impetus behind the county considering whether or not they want to continue or phase this organization out of existence?
Well, it really has been dormant for the past 2 or 3 years, and I think the big reason behind it is been money. Only until the past couple of years. Actually, you know, I mean, this past year has been a pretty strong year, but prior to that, budget's been a big part of it, and the county tightening its belt. But it's on the books, it exists, and it hasn't done much, and it hasn't really put out grants. But again, we've got to make some decisions
To
about.
have appointed members, even though it's dormant, is there a membership?
There are people that have been appointed to serve on it, but I don't think the board, there's been a meeting in a long time. It hasn't met whatsoever. And if you're interested in reading more about it, just Google Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, and all sorts of stuff pops up. Its bylaws, its mission, proposed ordinances, and then some very interesting press clips from, years past, even videos of previous meetings, talking about the wastewater challenge. And some of the meetings, particularly in 2011 and 12, I mean, they would be packed meeting rooms, in some of our town halls on this topic. So if you need to drill down, that's a great place to start, by just Googling that. There is a sort of a web page on the Cape Cod Commission's website with some background information on it, its bylaws and so forth. But I don't have the current list of appointees. But typically they were, like I said, the key wastewater person in each town. So it's just something, as a county official, I've actually been asking municipal officials around the Cape, what do they think? So there's no reason why I shouldn't be asking Yarmouth, along with Orleans, Falmouth, and all the other towns. Clearly, I'd be interested in getting a sense from the towns if there's some real need or an importance to keeping this. Because like I said, we're going to have a budget, and we're going to have to make a decision at the county level to put money in it or not. And then there's a question of, if we're not, then what value does it play? And at the county, there's a lot of differences of opinion across the board. But I think what's fundamentally important is, what do the towns think? So I'm going to put this question at some point to the Selectmen's Association or the Cape Cod Municipal Leaders Association, say, what do you think? So it's helpful to have at least some initial discussion about it early on. So I put it out there. Like I said, it was an opportunity for Cape towns to share information about what each town is doing. And as you know, the county is pushing forward with freshwater initiatives. And so the effort to expand the 208 program, the water quality program, is now moving into what can we do as a region to protect the water quality of our ponds and other freshwater bodies, which to me would seem to almost necessitate more engagement and interaction with the towns. But that's just my opinion. So like I said, rather than deliberate on it tonight, I just want to just flag it, sort of set the table for it so that we can deliberate, at a future meeting. And it doesn't have to be where it occupies the public's attention. It can be just amongst ourselves, probably during a manager's report, whenever. And I'd be very interested in hearing what our own team thinks about this, because I know Jeff participated in the past, and Bob may very well have in the past. But like I said, the local towns in the past have found it to be very important. So it's on the.
We all set?
I'm all set.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second? Have a second?
I'll-
Those in
I'll
favor?
make a second.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.